Thomas.
Hey, Friselli.
What's
up, buddy? What's up, man?
Good to be here.
All right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's good to be here at the tavern.
Bellying up to the bar, baby. 7:05, everybody. Tuesday, October 28th, 2025, the year of our Lord. So, Pete, what's going on? How you doing? How was the week going?
Oh, man, it's been a hell of a week. I can't get into it. Stuff at work I'm not allowed to talk about, but whoa, my head is spinning.
Yeah.
But it's all good to be here, man, with you, with friends. It's going to be a very tech-driven episode, so I'm going to learn a lot today, I believe. But no, it's all good, brother.
Yeah. No, well, you've got a great guest coming up. Christian was very much involved in the street, and then he was the reluctant recipient of some promotions. He'll talk about that. So he's a great guy. I've known him for years now, since he's retired, being in the tech space. So we're really looking forward to walking through his career and then all the tech stuff. We're going to do drones as first responders. We'll do body-worn cameras. We'll do facial rec, LPR, and then the latest and greatest thing, LPR. Just so you know, I've got earbuds in, so I'm going to up my game to pay attention. But before we get to Christian and everything that's going on in his career and in the tech world, there's a lot of stuff going on as it relates to Police Commissioner Ray Kelly has endorsed Andrew Cuomo. And I'm going to leave it to John and Eric on the Finest Unfiltered. And then tomorrow night, Ron and Rob are going to interview Curtis. But I got to be honest with you, I was a big fan of Ray Kelly, faults and all. I think he ran the police department like a parent should rule over their children. Like, you protect them. That's my opinion. You may or may not disagree. But his endorsement of Sliwa really disappoints me.
You mean of Cuomo?
I mean, of Cuomo and not Sliwa.
Right. Yeah. Look, let's be honest, Tommy. Curtis Sliwa is a quirky guy, but he's done a lot for New York City on his own time. You know, he put himself out there, put himself in harm's way at times. You know, as cops, I had hot and cold opinions of the Guardian Angels. You know, I mean, in some ways they were, almost like vigilantes. But again, they were out there protecting folks. So I agree. I mean, Cuomo, after what he did as governor, and look, he also was a big defund the police guy when that was in vogue. I have a problem with that. I believe that he's probably doing this because he sees that Sliwa doesn't have a chance, and he sees Mandami as a threat to a police department that he loved. So, I kind of understand why he would do it. I don't like it. I would love to see Curtis Sliwa win. I think Cuomo is a buffoon. But here's the other thing, man. Mandami is a danger to New York City in so many different ways. The only thing I think Cuomo has going for him is that he has governed and knows the political system. I mean, this guy is a guy who's never had a real job. He interned for his mommy, who was a movie director, and then went into politics, hasn't voted, hasn't taken a stance on everything. And everything that comes out of his mouth, frankly, is frightening to me, including his most recent lie about his auntie, who was, giving dirty looks because she wore a hijab. And now it turns out it wasn't his auntie. How do you mix up your aunt from a distant cousin? So he has zero credibility, but I fear that New Yorkers are mesmerized by him and he's going to get voted into office. It's terrifying.
Well, as it relates to politics, can we all agree they're all just lying to us, Republicans and Democrats alike, regardless of who they are, where they really stand, conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat? I'm fed up with them. John made a comment the other day on his show with Eric where he said he's not voting ever for an establishment politician ever again. I don't know where I'm at with that, but I will say I'm just tired of them all. I think they're all lying. They all lie. They're all pursuing power. They're all pursuing money.
I'm going to push back on you, brother.
I'm afraid of our community. Like, cynicism is ruling the world right now.
Well, let me push back gently on you here. I think there are some good ones out there, but you don't hear about them because they're not getting those sound bites because they don't say anything controversial. Let's take another step back. John Fetterman. I thought, here's a brain damaged dude. The guy could hardly speak when he got into office. He's making a lot more sense nowadays than a lot of people on either side of the aisle. And he has firm beliefs and he's putting country first. I've heard it come out of his mouth. I see it in his actions. I wish we would see more politicians on both sides of the aisle put country first public safety first, national security first, and kick that tribalism to the curb, because that's what's destroying our country, is this tug of war where they're putting their parties before the people. And that is complete BS in my opinion.
Yeah. So I totally with you. So John McCarr, I'm going to pull up. John's on right now. I thought he'd be working out, but I guess he's doing live. Clown still left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am stuck in the middle of you. Great song, John, and it's 100% true. So what I would say is, like, I always fantasize about somebody in the chamber pulling both the Democrats and the Republicans together, close the doors, and say, "People, come on, stop this. Can we
Fetterman and a couple others are trying, man, and they're demonizing the guy, because he's not towing the line. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So we'll leave the really deep politics to John and Eric in the morning tomorrow, 5:05. We'll do on the outro. We'll do their show tomorrow. They have a special guest, and then also with Ron and Rob doing Curtis Lewa tomorrow at 5:05 in the afternoon. So we'll leave the deep politics to them, because we're here to talk with Christian Quinn from Fairfax County in a minute. But there's one more thing I want to mention. What do you think about killing these narco terrorists and bombing them out in the Caribbean? And the Mexican president reached out, and, well, she didn't reach out. She just made a statement, and there's a whole bunch of people. I mean, these people are killing. It's a chemical warfare on our country, and they're designated narco terrorists, and we're killing them. What do you think?
Well, Tommy, we talked about this in other topics when we talked about the vaping issue, when you have the Chinese government sending unregulated products here that are sold off the shelves. They've added chemicals that are proven to be addictive in nature, much like the tobacco industry did back in the day with nicotine products. If you remember, Jeffrey Wigand blew the whistle on that, took hell for it. But look, here's the thing. Obama dropped ordinance on American citizens who were viewed to be, in line with terrorism. When you look at the fact that we have lost more people in the United States to fentanyl, right, in the last 5 years than we lost in 80 years of war, something has to be done. It can't just be, "Ooh, sorry to hear about the loss of your nephew or your cousin or your daughter or your son." We're doing something. I'm fine with it. I wish there was a better way. Look, the other thing is, I know where this intelligence is coming from that's leading to these strikes. I've been to the facility that leads the charge here. So I know what they're listening to. I know what they're seeing in live time on maps. So this isn't them just randomly taking swipes at people. They know who they're hitting, and I'm fine with it, man. Remember the movie Clear and Present Danger with Harrison Ford back in the day?
They do.
Something along those lines, man. This is a clear and present danger to the communities that we all live in, whether it's urban communities, whether it's rural communities, and we're doing something to prevent those deaths. So I'm perfectly fine with it. I'd like to see other ways, but this is what we got, and this is what we're going to use. Again, it's better than letting that stuff into the country and seeing people die, mostly kids.
Well, that's just what it is. It's kids. And, I have a lot of young people in my family, in my orbit, personally close to me, and then their extended friends and family. And I've been the family designated person to have these conversations with these kids about one pill can kill and all of that stuff. And if you have not seen that prescription come across the counter from the pharmacy, you do not take that pill. And the vapes, 100%. And so it is a massive strategy across multiple domains to try and hurt us from within. There's no doubt about that.
Let's remind our listeners, Tommy, if they have any questions about this. We had a previous guest on the show who is the nation's foremost expert at this, Derek Maltz. Refer to that episode, and Derek can really just educate you on exactly what the threat is, what some of the solutions might be. He was the former head of DEA's SOD, and then went on to be the acting DEA administrator for a while. And the guy is just, he currently spends so much of his personal time helping the families that are engaged in fentanyl who have lost loved ones that it's actually a bit inspiring, which is why I was honored to have him on the show. But I know we got a guest that's waiting for us.
No, but yeah, and Christian will pull him up. But to your point, maybe, and yes, everyone, please go back to the Derek Maltz episode. I think it was episode 5 or 6. Please do that. But maybe we should have him as a regular guest every couple of months or something for check-ins and see what's going on in the world, because it is wild. It is wild out there, and I don't think the news is doing. I'm done with mainstream media too. By the way, all their little sound bites, they've got nothing to tell us that's really formative and informational as to what's really going on in the world. So with that, I am going to bring up our guest. Are you ready?
Yeah, of course.
All right. All right, everybody. Christian Quinn.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Good to see you, Tom. Good to see you, Pete.
All right.
Good to see you, brother.
All right, good. So Christian Quinn, so just everybody for a little background, Christian Quinn and I, because we're in the tech space, probably 4 or 5 years ago, we got to know each other. We have a whole bunch of common friends, and we all just got back from IACP, where we had 16,000 probably acquaintances of some sort and everything. It's really the place to be if you're interested in what's going on in law enforcement technology, everything from helicopters and THVs, temporary headquarters vehicles, for those of you who didn't know what the acronym was, which are the cool stuff, like really cool police squad cars and RMPs for New Yorkers. I mean, just that stuff is just fun. But then where Christian and I cross over is the technology space. So we'll get into that later today. So Christian, please introduce yourself. Give us a little background. Where'd you grow up? What, where and when did it become like a thought that you'd become a police officer, like going from Massachusetts down to DC? And just walk us through the beginning.
Sure. So obviously Christian Quinn retired from Fairfax County VA in 2021. And I would say that my path was completely disjointed and unplanned. So grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts, which is same city where Rocky Marciano and Marvin Hagler are from. Not yet, exactly. Not a lot of other things to do there. So not that we wanted for anything. My mom had me really young, and we, it was a tough city. And I remember seeing the movie Wall Street and thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to make some money. I want to get out of here. So I was a good student, good athlete. Went to undergrad in Southern Mass, and I was studying business and management information systems. And one of my electives was like a criminal justice class. I can't remember what it was, but the professor there, I think it was my junior year, was like, hey, they hire summer cops on Cape Cod. And I was like, what do they do? And he's like, well, they like patrol the main street. They like ride with the regular guys. They like patrol the beaches and whatever. They're eligible for details and this. And my summer job was working for Coca-Cola in the warehouse 6 days a week. I had to get up 5 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, well, that sounds like a better gig. So I applied for it, went down, interviewed. It was so long ago that during the interview, they were asking me about the Rodney King case, because that had just happened when I was interviewing there. And ultimately got the job. I've since talked to I keep in touch with some people from there. And the funny thing was, looking back, it's like crazy, because you go to like 2 weeks of training, and they give you a gun and badge, and it's like, off you go do good, which obviously nobody would do anymore. But at the time, like, you're out there and you're working Hyannis was the beat that I had. And I learned a ton there, got a taste for it, got to know like a bunch of people on the job. And I am one of those people that, like, I never had a single relative in any direction that like was in public safety, not police, fire, anything. No one steered me toward that. But came home from that, like, having learned a lot, having gotten a taste for it, having really appreciated like the work to be done, the camaraderie. But I still didn't think like, oh, I'm going to do that for a living. But it kind of made me pivot and think, oh, maybe I would do something related to that. And I always had like kind of a penchant for tech. Like I said, I was minoring in management information systems at the time. So ultimately, did that a couple summers and decided I went back to Barnstable, and they used to do this thing where they keep you around as kind of a provisional. So at the end of the summer, I was still down on the Cape, and by around I think it was around Columbus Day, where like in the old days of like everything closing, like see you next season, and there was like not a lot going on. and I'm 21, 22 years old. And I told my roommate, I'm like, I cannot do this. So I was getting ready to go to grad school, and at the time I wanted to study forensics, and there were actually only 3 places, but I mean, forensics, like none of these shows were out, like CSI, none of that was out yet. So there's only
Right.
3 places you could study forensics: John Jay in New York, Sam Houston in Texas, or GW in DC. So ultimately I went to GW, and when I was getting ready to leave, there was a sergeant at the department, and he was like, "Hey, don't come back." And I was like, "I love it here." And he's like, "Go, if you're going to stay in this line of work," he's like, "go to a big police department." And he told me at the time, he said, "Go to Seattle, go to LA, go look at one of those departments." And he said, "You love it here because you like bar fights and you like chasing drunks and you like that kind of stuff." He's like, "This is going to get old for you." And so, you know, it's kind of, he did me a favor giving me that counsel. So I went to GW for forensics, interned at Secret Service, and still was like, I'm not really sure what direction I'm going. Thought I was going to go federal, but the feds were on a freeze. And there was a guy in my program that said, "Hey, what are you doing after graduation?" And I was starting to put in applications, and he was a Fairfax County cop. And he said, "We're hiring." And I had no idea where Fairfax County was, didn't know anything about the department, and ultimately applied there. And they were the first ones to hire me. So even in the academy, I still thought like, I'm probably only going to be here for a little bit. I had other applications in, and while I was in our academy, I went down to Quantico. I did the physical, and they were doing my background, and they wanted me to go to their training. It was the week of Halloween, whatever it was. And I was graduating our academy September 17th. And that was like the old days of academies. And obviously I'd already been through some training in mass. And I was like, man, I do not have another 5 months of this in me. I'd moved for the job. And I was like, I'll revisit this in a few years. I'm gonna like stay here and pay down some student loans and, you know, like gain some experience, and, you know, that'll be there. And I'm in the DC area anyway. And then I think probably, you know, something that you wouldn't think has the impact that it does in other parts of the country, because you guys obviously lived in New York. But when 9/11 happened, I had just made it to organized crime and intel. And probably I should back up a little bit. So I was kind of like,
let's do this, Christian.
Sure.
I didn't do it because we are in a tavern. So
all right.
Pete's drinking tequila tonight. And so because he said he had a rough day today, so he's gonna self-medicate. I'm drinking high quality H2O. I'm just going water tonight. Doesn't matter why, but it is. And then Christian, of course, at the tavern, appropriate for October, Sam Adams Jack-o'-lantern. So thanks for joining us. Let's get into your career and let's walk through the academy. And then I got some pictures I'll bring up. But everyone, please share what you're drinking in the chat. We love the chat. We love the funny comments. A couple of haters will show up. We love them too. But that's all good. Yeah, please. What are you drinking? We're in the tavern tonight. Belly up to the bar. So Christian, go academy. And then I got some pictures I'll bring up while you're talking.
So even before the academy, I'm going through the background, and my background investor is a guy named Ron Brown, who I never got to know well because he retired while I was in the academy. But this is like probably one of the final interviews, and he said, "Do you want to help people?" And I said, "Yeah, you know, in the scheme of things, I'd like to help people, but I want to know that, you know, I want to feel like I'm on the right side of things." But I said, "You know, I'd really like to catch the guys who think they're smarter than everybody else, the guys that are committing all kinds of crime all the time and getting away with it. I'm like, you know, I'd like to be hunting those guys." And this guy, and I didn't know any better. So he closes the folder and takes off his glasses, and he goes, "You know what, buddy?" He goes, "You're a breath of fresh air." And he goes, "I got all these kids coming through here. They think this is Department of Social Services." And he said to me, he goes, "Look, we're populating the west end of the county a lot because we're building new stations at the time." And he said, "If you want to work the east end of the county," he said, "you got to come out in the top 3 in the academy, and you can, the top 3 get to pick their station." He said, "You should go to Mount Vernon." And he said, "Mount Vernon's busy. It's the Route 1 corridor. It runs south from DC down to Woodbridge." So, to Charlie's question, I got hired in '96. So I ended up at Mount Vernon, and he kind of said to me, he goes, "If anybody else asks you if you want to help people, make sure you tell them you do." And he goes, "Don't you leave that part out." and then he said, when you get out of the academy and you get to Mount Vernon, you get some experience. And he said, you try to make it to the jump outs. And I was like, oh, okay. He goes, that's the street crimes unit. And he said, those guys do serious work. And he said, you'll like it. You fit in there. I'm like, okay. So I did what he told me, did well in the academy. I went to Mount Vernon Station, and it was an awesome station. And because I had some experience, I was able to hit the ground running. So that's me in the mean streets of Hyannis on the left there, and me, the day I graduated the academy, on the right. And I ended up down at Mount Vernon, and it was an awesome station to work at. I had like good trainers, I had good work to do. Started kicking informants up to street crimes, and ultimately got to do a temp with them, and processed for that job. And they had like physical requirements, and you had to be really sharp on search and seizure, and you had to consistently shoot well. So I made it there, and just a awesome, like kind of cross-trained group of like both undercovers and tactical. And you were assigned to like all the like problematic things. So there was like robbery series or street drug stuff or vice activity or what have you. Like wanted persons, like whatever was hot, we got put on. And I am there. We worked in those days. We worked like a 410s, and we worked a rotating Wednesday to Saturday, Tuesday to Friday. So every other weekend you had 2 days. Every other weekend you had 4. And we trained on Saturdays. So my first Saturday, it was kind of like early March, and it's like that cold spring. And we used to train out in Clifton at our old firearms range, and it was an outdoor range. And I remember this so vividly because there's all this fog rolling in off the woods and coming down over the berm. And there's like 15 guys, and we trained exactly as we practiced like we played. So everybody's kitted up. We're in all black, helmets, balaclavas, gloves, everything. Like we always trained in full gear, vests. So we're all lined up, and we all start shooting, and there was all this smoke wafting off everybody's barrels, and it was like a crisp spring morning, and the guy next to me looks at me, he goes, $34 an hour, motherfucker. And I wanted to like squeal like a little kid that just saw all his Christmas presents. I was like, I can't believe this is our job. We get to do this. And it was such an awesome job. Just great people. Really, really important mission. Cool job. But like I said, 9/11 happened, and I was in that assignment. I was actually in training that week. I was in civil disturbance school, which I was pissed about because I had qualified for firearms instructor school, but I had never been to CDU school. And they were like, hey, you have to go to CDU school. So I was in CDU school, and I think we were working evenings. So I got up to a bunch of, it was pager at the time. My pager kept beeping, and it was like all this text messages on a terrorist attack, which, it's like limited characters. I'm like, what are they talking about? So I put the TV on, and I'm now seeing everything happening. And I got dressed, I raced to work like everybody did. And there was this very odd, nothing to do, right? Like I lived probably 5-6 miles from the Pentagon, but I raced the other way to get to work. And everybody did the same thing. We all showed up, and there was just like nothing for us to do. Like the helicopter and some of our units had run up to the Pentagon to do primarily like medical assistance and traffic control and that kind of stuff. But it was a very odd window of time. But on the heels of that, like it really changed a lot of things in the National Capital Region, where a lot of us in organized crime and intel suddenly got involved in all kinds of cases that we hadn't before. And those are obviously pics from the patrol days. And that's me running a drug field test kit on, looks like some heroin there. But it really opened the door to like a lot of training and a lot of case involvement and things that like we would probably have never been involved in, where like it wasn't like the gloves were off, but it was like very understood that like, like of those hijackers, like I think 10 of them were like associated with the Dar al-Hijra Mosque in Falls Church. A bunch of them had ties to Northern Virginia, or they lived in apartments in Springfield. And like we started to get tasked with like follow-up. We started to get tasked with like surveillance. We started to get tasked with like other things. And it was just really meaningful work. And it was like interesting work and good work and important work. And then we were still doing like our core mission stuff. And a year later, the Beltway sniper event happened. And at that point, I think when Beltway Sniper happened, I think I had just moved over to narcotics because I had an awesome boss in Jump. Jump was the nickname for street crimes, and that was like we didn't come up with that. The street did. Like everybody called us the jump outs because that's what you would see happen was guys would just come out of like nowhere and swarm an area. So when we did our buy, bust, and takedowns. So when the Beltway Sniper event happened, myself and a number of other people got picked up quick on that. And it was kind of like, at the time it was like, go out there and figure out what's going on, go out there and find, and you're doing counter surveillance and you're following potential targets around and it was like, like cops being cops. Like we didn't have smartphones. So we would do the brief. We were working 12 on, 12 off, 7 days a week. We would do the real briefing. And then we'd all go huddle up in a parking lot and somebody put their friend on speaker, like in Maryland, and be like, what do you guys know? And like, we're all exchanging notes. And, forever we're looking for like a white van when in reality, it's like, we're looking for a Middle Eastern guy in a white van. And in reality, like it's two guys that are like African-American in a blue Chevy, but a lot of miscues and things like that. But that was like to live that as a cop and to see how afraid people were and to see how challenging it was, because like obviously like 9/11 had just happened a year before, and we thought like, is this an extension of that? Is this some kind of terrorism local? Like, because it was brutal. And you're doing everything you can. You're stopping all the traffic on the highways. You're like, I mean, we were following people around, and I remember like because the anniversary of it just passed this past week, when Malvo and John Allen Muhammad were going to get locked up. We all went to breakfast at a diner because they had them under surveillance. They were going to lock them up. They were not in Virginia at that point. So a bunch of us that were on that work went to a diner in Vienna and we're having breakfast. It was like the first moment you could relax in 3 weeks. And it felt like it'd been going on forever. And it was only 3 weeks. And I remember saying to somebody, like, what happens with all those guys who've been following around that like stockpiling weapons, like cinder blocking in their windows? There were so many guys that we were following that were like, this has got to be the guy. This guy's crazy. This guy's got he's storing all kinds of guns. He hates the government. He hates his neighbors. And I'm like, well, I guess nobody's watching them now. So it's a really weird time, but also like a time for doing like good work, good stuff. I mean, there was like a lot of funny things that happened while I was doing that kind of work too. There was I was sitting in court one day on a Friday. I had a plea agreement, and a guy from the DEA task force called me. He said, hey, is there any chance you're around Fairfax? I said, hey, I'm at the courthouse. I said, I got a plea agreement. It was like 8:45 in the morning or whatever. I'm like, I should be out of here before 10 unless this guy changes his tune. And even if he does, I'm still leaving because we're not ready to go. So he's like, hey, can you run by this house in Clifton? It was I'm like, I knew it was going to be a nice place because I'd never even heard of the neighborhood. So I'm like, I have no idea where that is, but I am probably right up the road from there. I'm at court. So I get out of court and I run down and set up on this house. And it was associated with this guy that the night before got stopped, and he had like some firearms in the car, and he was supposed to be like involved in some like big deal in Maryland. And I set up on his house, and I'm in a suit. I'm in like I can't remember what I was driving then. It was like a Chrysler Sebring or something. It was not like a stereotypical cop car. And all I had was like one of those little visor lights, like the little flashing blue light. So right. I am down there for like maybe 15 minutes, and this truck pulls up, and the guy starts running up the driveway. And I was like, oh, who's this? So I pull up because before, and there was like this house that was like $2 million then. I mean, this house is probably 10, 12 million now. It was huge, right. Beautiful house in Clifton on all this land. So I go to pull up, and we're doing the chase, no chase, where he runs back to his truck and jumps in. And I'm now following him with my one little blue light on the visor. And I'm calling patrol like, hey, I need this car stopped. So he finally stops, and I walk up to him, have a conversation with him. And he's like a convicted felon or something, but I can see, I'm looking at him and looking down in the truck, and I can see a Glock sticking out of the buttstock of it's like the handle sticking out of like those, it's almost like a slide compartment behind the seats. I can see it sticking out in arm's length. And I said, hey, you have any weapons in the car? He's like, no, I don't have any weapons. I'm like, all right. So I got some other people down there, ended up taking him out. I think I get some dope or something out of the car, but I ended up getting PC for the house. And we hit the house, and there's a huge safe in the basement. And I'm calling the task force, and I'm like, hey, there's a huge safe in this house. And they're like, hey, can you take it? I'm like, well, there's no way we can get at it. We had the fire department come, we never come. So I end up, like, my boss was awesome. Like, he had a lot of faith in me. This guy, Billy Desmond, just a great guy to work for. And I said, hey, I want to take this safe. And he's like, how are you going to get it? I'm like, we could have a wrecker pull it out. So we put straps through the house and like basically like a cable through the house. The guy's office is in the basement. We wrapped up the safe with these like basically tow straps, and it's a huge wrecker. And it's in the guy's yard. And this is Clifton, like beautiful neighbor. We've now torn up the yard, and I think the fire department had to cut part of the door frame off so we could like pull this thing out. And it is doing a ton of damage. Like the size of a refrigerator coming up, and the truck is like struggling with it, like the winch is pulling the truck. And anyway, we get it out, we put it on a flatbed, one of our flatbeds, and we're like, hey, we got to take this back to a secure police station to maintain chain of custody. So it's a show. So so I called, and they had the guy in custody, and they were like, hey, you won't give up the combo. And I'm like, it's got to be worth taking. Like why would he risk us destroying his house to take this? Right. So we take it. And there was a locksmith in Vienna that worked for, I think it was like Fort Knox or whatever it was. And I tow this safe there on a flatbed. And Pete, this is like an ATF nexus you appreciate. And my boss was awesome, but he was like, I hope something's in that safe. Because like there's like a ton of resources, a lot of damage.
Like Geraldo Rivera and Al Capone.
We didn't really have anything else in the house. So we get to this place, and the guy walks up and he's like, most people buy these and they don't even bother to set the combo. They just use the factory combo. So like, I don't even know like how many sleuths we had on this that are doing the guy's birthday, his kids' birthdays. So this guy from the safe company's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pound and opens it. I'm like,
that's so good.
So the good thing was I heard like the horns and the trumpets because the safe opens and there's like either a quarter key of crack and a quarter key of powder, or a half key of crack and a half key of powder, and like AK-47 Uzi, fully automatic Uzi. I'm like, in the Eastern District, I'm like, this dude's hosed.
Yeah.
So, so Pete, the beauty of this was I drive it back to the office. I made sure we could still open it with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that would have been so much paperwork for me. ATF came and they took every firearm. They did all the paperwork. They took the dope. I like literally had to do like nothing. And that ended up being a sprawling case that turned into some other like awesome stuff. So it was a cool case.
That's a good story. So let's bring up some other stuff, Christian, while you're at it. Look at these pictures.
That one, September 1st, 2000, is my very first cold crack. They sent me out on the wire. And I think I found a guy at 7-Eleven, sold me 3 crack rocks for $50. So that is me after growing my hair for quite some time and breaking my mom's heart coming home looking like that. But I look like that.
Well, let me ask you something. Were you always high and tight and then you grew the long hair? Because
it's funny. I went to Catholic school and then I went to Catholic college.
Right.
When I grew a facial hair working undercover, it was the first time I ever saw my own face with more than like 3 days growth. I shaved every day of my life and I kept my hair high and tight my whole life. So I really never had long hair or a beard until I actually was on the job. And then the funny thing is when I was like that so long, and even after like I cut my hair, like I still always had like a goatee when I was in Intel, like more like that look on the right. So when I cleaned up, I remember people saying to me like, man, I don't really recognize you without facial hair. I'm like, funny because I never had. But yeah, the one on the right, when weed was still something bad, I think that's, I want to say 2, 3, I think it's 22 pounds, all compressed. And then the guy had a gun in his waistband and a whole bunch of cash on him. I got that in Chantilly at a hotel.
So good.
But probably one of my less than brag right UC stories was I so my boss in Jump was moving over to narcotics, and I love working Jump out. And he pulled me into the office and he's like, "Hey man, you make a lot of cases. Did you ever think like maybe you want to make bigger cases? Maybe you want to see where some of these go?" So Ron's weighing in on the 3 for 50 in Virginia. That's a good deal. I don't know about now, but so so he was like, "Why don't you think about coming over to narcotics and working bigger cases?" And like he kind of sold me on it, and I did. So I went over to Narcs, and I made a lot of like my niche was cocaine cases. Like that was where I like. I mean, there were guys in the office doing big MDMA cases. There were guys doing opioids. I remember when like all of a sudden we're doing like oxy cases like crazy, like with the whole Purdue Pharma thing and all that and all the stuff behind that. I remember that hitting. I remember like guys doing like huge like hydro weed cases coming down from like Canada. But like I did a lot of coke cases. So, but I actually, for as clean cut as I was, I actually excelled at UC work. Like I loved working. I love being out on the wire. And I was asked by somebody else. It was like, now I'm gonna like you were teasing me earlier. They were like, "Hey, it would help if you had like a younger, decent looking undercover that was kind of clean cut." So we're like, "That's you, bro." So this girl likes to party, blah blah blah. So I'm like, "Yeah, I'll go." So I'm going to this house, and I'm working with some other guys, CI. I mean, I briefed him up and like, "Hey, what can we get? It's this, that." And I was under the impression that like she did escort work. So we're driving there, and he mentions in passing something about me having to get hit with a car antenna, and I was like, "What?" I'm like, "What did you say?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's like just so she knows you're cool." I'm like, "Why would I get hit with a car antenna?" He's like, "She's into like dominatrix stuff." I'm like, "Well, why would I have to get hit with a car antenna?" And he's like, "I told her that you were, so she wouldn't think you were a cop." And I was like, "Of all the things you would tell her, why would you tell her that?" And I was like, "I'm not getting hit with a car antenna." So I was like, let's just see if we can get her out on the porch and talk to her, and let's see if we can get anything. So like now this thing's like kind of sketchy from go. So we go there, and she comes out, and this is like some out of a movie. She's in this like black leather skirt, this black halter top with like a jacket on over it, and I'm gonna put this nicely. She's probably about 7 inches shorter than me and weighs about the same as me, and I'm sitting on this porch swing on the porch, and like she's not talking about dope at all. But she's telling me about like her sex swing and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I gotta get out of here. So she puts her heel on the swing and she's swinging me. So I'm sitting on the little normal, me and the informant are sitting on the wooden swing out front, and she's pushing the swing and I'm swinging back and forth like a little kid, like terrified. I was like, I'm getting out of here. So she had offered to let us come in. I'm like, no, I think I'm good. I'm like, we're gonna go. So I get to the car, and of course, like I come up on the wire. I'm like, "Hey, this is a no-go. This is not happening." So, and of course, once I turn the radio on, it just gets blown up. They're like, "Hey, man," they're like, "We came out here to buy some dope. Go back there and go get some dope." And I'm like, "Nope. Somebody can do trash runs. Somebody can do surveillance or something else here, but I'm not going in there." But I mean, I had like very thankfully, like I had nothing.
Hey, Chris,
I mean, I had some close ones. I had some ugly ones.
let me ask you a question. Do you think the reason that you were able to do so much undercover work in this area, being clean shaven and everything, is just the abundance of colleges in the Fairfax County area?
No, because I really didn't. I didn't really work into targets like that. I think part of it was when I first started, I was really dirtied up, but it was more like the security blanket of. I also like I'd grown up in a tougher city, so I was like it wasn't that scary for me to be out on a wire. It wasn't that foreign. It was kind of like just gift of gab and willingness to kind of like see what you could get. But then later, when I was like cleaned up, it was more just the certainty of like I can do this. So in those days you had a tenure cap, like you couldn't stay out in that kind of work for like 6 years, which they changed at some point. So around the 4.5-year mark, I started looking for a home. So I went to auto theft as a detective, and I ended up working a really cool case. I actually had a nexus to New York. The auto crime guys, I can't remember anybody's name back then.
Tommy Burke.
I don't remember.
Tommy Burke is the legend.
Yeah,
he's the legend.
So it would have been early 2000s, but they actually brought me up to NYPD. I got to go to their auto crime school. It was like it was like a condemned hospital building where they're old.
All of our buildings, except for the palace, come on. I worked in a building in narcotics that was condemned by OSHA, and they told us to get out, and we still stayed there for 3 more years, like in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Oh, OSHA's telling you got to get out, and they're like, "Where are we gonna go?"
A common thing, because we had to move our office due to mold. They were like, "Hey, you can't stay here. It's not safe for breathing."
So hold the auto crime story. I want to bring up some pictures. I have to bring this one up because I have a lot of. This is hilarious. So what is going on? Because I suspect there's some things there, but I'm going to let you frame it up first.
I think that's my very first morning in patrol, and we get like a DOA call, and it's actually a kind of a sad older woman, terminally ill, commits suicide by putting a bag over her head and drinking a bunch, and clearly dead. Like you can see.
I knew that. I saw that on the legs 100%. So I said, I got to ask this, but who's the guy in the back with the gloves and the scrub shirt, but he's wearing shorts?
So I think he was actually from the ME's office. And this is in the old days where we literally applied a toe tag to the toe. Right. So that's me putting the toe tag on. And the funny thing about that was, like, very obviously deceased, right? And I'm fresh out of a master's degree in forensics. Yeah. And the fire department comes in, rips the bag off her head and starts doing like CPR. I'm like, hey, like, what are you doing? Like, because I'm thinking like hyper attentive to evidence. I'm like, she's got like liver, rigor, like the whole, like she's cold to the touch. You don't need to do anything. So anyway, that's me and my first DOA out of the gate. That was like either my first or second shift.
Oh my God. I had to bring that one up because I wanted. All right, let's get back to you, auto crime. I had to bring that one up. I didn't want to miss that one. We have a bunch of other pictures and that you can speak to, and they're mostly as you kind of rise up. But let's do the auto crime stuff.
So what was cool is I got into this clone vehicle case that ended up going back and forth to like, it was like I think because I'd come out of like organized crime, kind of saw the connections in it, where it was these guys were stealing high-end cars, revinning them, cloning them, retitling them, and selling them through the auctions, and then laundering the money through liquor stores in Maryland. And ended up getting involved with a guy from the bureau who was in Pennsylvania, and we ended up, I think we locked up like 14 targets or so, but they were like laundering money through like foreign investments and stuff. It was a cool case, and the final one of the kind of ringleaders of that went up and did an interview with him in Pennsylvania, and he said, tell that cop from Fairfax to bring a dry erase board with him. And he just mapped everything out, ended up taking a plea agreement. But the point of this was it kind of gave me like a graduate education in stolen cars, and like getting to go up to like NYPD and some other good schools and really learn about like titling and revinning and like and DMV fraud and other things, because they had like people in DMV that were dirty that were helping them out. So I'm sitting in CIB, which at the time was like a shirt and tie job. I think now they can wear like, whatever, like 511s and polos. But this lieutenant came to me and said, hey, we're putting something together in Intel. Do you think you could buy stolen parts? And I was like, I can buy you whole stolen cars. And he's like, how many cars you think you can buy? I'm like, I can buy more cars than you have buy money. And he was like, all right. So we ended up putting this thing together. It's like a fictitious shop. And I dirty back up again, and we get into like kind of like free reign. Like, all right, like see what you can get going. So I'm hanging out at pawn shops, bars, no CIs, completely like off grid, full-time UC work. And I ended up just meeting a bunch of guys, and I developed like a pyramid scheme almost, where I would give them cards and I'd be like, hey, if you send somebody to me to fence things, I'll give you a cut of what they fence. The other thing that we were doing over there was untaxed cigarette cases. And when I first saw this, and Pete, I did come around on this, like, because I'd come from like working like high level dope and gun cases. I'm like, cigarettes, this is some JV shit. Like, what is this? So,
where the money's going.
But
Yeah.
I will tell you, like, I never saw so much currency as I did untaxed cigarettes. And guys like if you do a $2,500 Coke deal, somebody's got a gun on, right? We had guys show up to buy tractor trailers with the cigarettes, like 2 guys carrying duffel bags with like Chinese nationals, like Middle Eastern guys, $400,000 in currency, no security detail. And I was baffled. I'm like, I cannot believe this.
When I went through the ATF Academy, the running joke with the instructors there was if any of them ever got fired, they would sell contraband cigarettes and get rich.
I remember saying that. I was like, this might be my retirement job because everybody's making $1 million. And if they get caught, they take a plea agreement and they don't do 6 months. I'm like,
no, but look, Hezbollah was using that to raise money. The Yemenis, what's that? The Houthis?
So that ended up being a thing where we ended up getting a lot of traction because remember, this is like 4 or 5 years removed from 9/11. What we found was there was a lot of money going into other things. So we got a lot of leash to like really build cases. And I ended up being involved in some like really cool cases where like came to know some guys that were doing a lot of bad stuff. But they trusted me enough that like a couple guys that committed a homicide and then called me for a ride. They gave me the guns that they committed the homicide with to get rid of. And we put those guys in for good. And you know, that's like one of those cases that it was a terrible case. They robbed a cab driver. He did everything right. They killed him anyway. These guys had like shot people in Richmond. They had shot people over nothing. So that, and you know, those are the kind of complicated cases that like you, like those sometimes go cold if you don't have that kind of intel. So that was like a really cool assignment. But that was getting ready to end. And I was like, man, I can't go back to a shirt and tie job. So I went back to jump one more time and I was on the list to get promoted. I didn't know if I'd get promoted, but I was lucky. I got to spend about 2 more years in street crimes, got promoted, went back to Mount Vernon to train, and I got assigned to Mason Station, which is a cool station, smaller district, only like 18 square miles. It's like 118,000 people, like ton of stuff going on, like super diverse, really like a lot of like issues related to immigration, diplomatic immunity, like just there's a lot going on there. It's like a cool place to work. It's like the littlest part of the district is like right where Falls Church, Fairfax County, Alexandria City, and Arlington all come together. So a lot of cross-border stuff, like neat, different kind of policing, different tastes from Mount Vernon. And then I went back to jump one more time as a supervisor. I just got there. I got there that pay period, and I'd just taken the second lieutenant's test. And I didn't know, but I'd come out number 1 for the lieutenant's test. So I get a call on Wednesday, like, hey, you're going wherever I was going on, supposed to be going on Friday. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to stay here, which in those days, that was like blasphemy. Like you turned down a promotion. And I told my boss, I was like, hey, this is the last chance I get to call high level ops with the security blanket of somebody that really has been doing this a long time. I want to be very good at running ops. I want to be very good at like doing high stakes stuff. So I stayed for maybe another 8-9 months working with this guy, Timmy Hoover, who was like the maestro. He was the master at running ops, and just learned so much from him, which really served me well. So I got a call and somebody said, hey, what do you think about coming down to Mount Vernon as the bike lieutenant? So I went down to Mount Vernon, super fun job. And I'm working National Night Out in that August. And I ran into these 2 guys. One was a guy who's a major named Larry Mosier, who my career crossed paths with him a bunch of times in street crimes, Route 1, other places, the academy even. Just like solid police, solid leader. And this other guy, Steve Sellers, who I didn't know well. He was quiet, but he was our assistant chief. And he but he was my station commander. And when I worked midnights, and would make a good case and put in my paperwork, and this is like back in the old paper days, like he would read cases and he'd put Post-its in your mailbox and he'd be like, hey, really good case. Like he championed good police work. He's just a solid boss, really good guy. And I said to both of those two, because they were getting ready to retire, I'm like, I'm kind of worried that, because I was like happy as a second lieutenant, like running something. And I said, I'm worried that we're losing all our good bosses. And it was Sellers who went on to be the chief of Albemarle County.
That's my county, buddy.
Yep. And,
so he was here a couple of years and he moved on. I think he's back up in Fredericksburg. He just moved up to be closer to family. But Steve spent some time down here in Albemarle County. He's a gentleman. And when you say he's just a soft, quiet, easygoing guy, like that's him. But yeah. I think when he spoke, he probably spoke very loudly, right?
And very smart, very reasonable.
Yep.
But he actually uncharacteristically, when I said, I'm kind of nervous that we're losing all our good leaders, he poked me in the chest, which was not his way. And he was like, then you better do something about it. And he was like, you can stay out here and have fun, or you can, put that aside and do your part. He's like, because you're going to blink and you're going to find that you're working for people who aren't as smart as you and don't care about the mission as much as you. And you're going to regret that you didn't move. He's like, so you should do something about it. And I was like, it was like I had no real aspirations for climbing the ladder. Very happy. I was happy as a street cop. I was happy as a detective. I basically bumped up because our master police officer process was so convoluted. I was like, well, if I'm ever going to get a raise, I have to at least become a first line supervisor. So took the test, bounced around a little bit. I went to CIB, ran our fugitive squad. And then my second son was going to be born. And my wife was like, you've been on nights for whatever it was like 13, 15 years. And she's, I think 13, 14. And she's like, you got to be around more. So I was running property crimes in West Springfield, which was a sleepy job, but it ended up being a great thing for a while, for about a year, because I was working for this guy, Joe Hill, who left to become the chief of Horry County, who I didn't know. And he was an awesome guy, but he didn't have a deputy commander. And I went to him and I was like, hey, I had gone from doing 100-mile-an-hour work to being the lieutenant over property crimes. And I was like, I don't have 6 hours of work to do a day. I'm like, I come in every day, I work out, I do all my paperwork. I'm like following, like the detectives, I think at first didn't know what to make of me because I was like going out with them doing interviews, like packaging property. But they eventually took to me. They were kind of like, this guy's all right. But I think when I first got there, they were like, this dude's like a problem. Because I was like going out doing knock and talks with them. But I went to the commander of the district and I was like, hey man, I don't have 6 hours of work to do a day. Like, if you want to give me anything to do. So he started giving me all these things to do. And it was actually awesome because I learned all these admin jobs. He started bringing me to meetings with him. So I got promoted out of there and made commander. It's funny because my first 6 months, like you talk about reluctant leadership, I was the commander of the school resource officer program. And I was a fish out of water. I was like, what do they do here? What's the job here exactly? So, but like along the, I should mention, like I sprinkled in these like tech advancements along the way. So when I was in fugitive, I went to, well, even backing up, I was in auto theft. And my very first day there, I'm assigning the cases and we have like an Excel sheet that you enter all the cases in and you use pencil and tick sheet to count the cases. And I said to the guys, I'm like, I don't know what we're going to be doing 6 months from now, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to be this. So there was a guy in the department that had a background in coding. And I had him temporarily assigned to me for, I think 2 or 3 pay periods. And he ended up, we like, I drew it up on paper and he built the system to like classify cases and prioritize cases. And we did this on like, I'm just like whatever we had at the time. And it was an unapproved program. So we had to like actually move it around the server so we could keep using it. And then ultimately, it gave us like all these insights where you could see like what vehicles are going missing and never coming back, like what detectors are closing the most cases, like how many motorcycle cases do we have linked directly to vans? And we just started working way smarter. And then when I went to fugitive, I went to somebody in IT and designed a on SharePoint, which was all we had, this extradition organizer to like prioritize pickups based on like calendar and drop dead dates and things like that. And ended up being, so it was like a board that stayed lit up that you could look at and see where is everybody. Cause I realized I'm like, I supervise all these people and their job is to be somewhere else. Like I have no idea like where anybody is. And I mean, when I say where anybody is, I don't mean like out on the street. I mean, they're in California, they're in Michigan, no idea where anybody is. So, and that presents a quandary because when you get a call from like DC and they're like, come get this guy today, on any given day, you're like, I don't even know who's working. Like it was just such a convoluted system. So we built something there. But anyway, I go to schools and it was a brutal time because it was like a year after Sandy Hook and everything was like super inflammatory, super politically charged. It was like, like just no win questions. And you're assigned to the school. So you work out of school administration building, even though you're commander on the police department. A lot of challenges there. For 6 months, I came home every day and I'm like, I'm going to give him the money back. I hate this job. Like I really, but then I settled in, I found my way, kind of learned a lot. But over there, I used a solutions architect from the school system and we built a system because one of my biggest challenges was like principals would come to you or police commanders would come to you and be like, you got to get rid of this SRO. And I was like, how do you know what a good SRO does versus a bad SRO? I don't even know. Right. Like, what are they? You can't measure them on arrests and tickets and things. They don't do that, but they handle a lot of stuff. Like, so we built a system to specifically catalog what they did, and it was really helpful. And the good ones loved it. And I was watching the chat, and like obviously the rotten ones were suddenly like, oh, I really don't want this because it reveals like the people who are doing nothing, like hiding out. You quickly spot them, but there was a lot of people doing a lot of cool stuff. Like thousands and thousands of hours and like instruction to parents and kids and like feel good stuff that it was like, man, we've never tapped into any of this. So, but got promoted out of there, did a good enough job that I made, I sat in limbo at headquarters and there was a cool major who went on to be the chief out in Winchester and John Piper. And he came to me and he's like, hey, he's like, you're not in trouble. He's like, they've got you parked because they're going to promote you. So I worked on that when the Silver Line was being built out to Tyson's and further in Dulles. I did the incident action plan on that and the ops plan for the inaugural run and stuff. And that was another like one of those weird jobs. It was like, oh, I learned a bunch there about transportation and stuff like that, transit. And then I got promoted to the World Police and Fire Games were coming. So I was assigned as the commander of that to plan for that and do all the security and operations planning for that. So I pulled that off. And I was supposed to get a district. Like they had asked me like, hey, what do you want? And I was like, I want a station. I want like basically like our equivalent of a precinct. And right. And then it was on the heels of like Ferguson and everything. So, and then we had a bad shoot. So I got assigned to policy and directives, which was like another like, just grind of like retooling all of our policies, rolling out agency training. And it was, another job, learned a ton, didn't like going to work every day, but I learned a ton. And,
well, you're being punished for being competent is what's happening there.
I heard that many times back then, but that set me up for things later. But anyway, I asked for my district and I went to Mason District as the commander. Loved that job, worked really hard, worked a lot of long days, but that was a cool gig because you have like 140 people and you get to impact their day to day. You get to get them the things they need. Mason was a cool district. You had Fairfax Hospital, ExxonMobil's headquarters got vacated at the time. Like there was like a lot going on there. So it was busy with neat stuff, busy with complicated things, like great. Like we always joke that the cops working there, they don't work there because it's a favorable commute. It's the furthest east point in the county. They work there because they want to work there. So there's a lot of good work being done there. I did spend a lot of time there. They brought one of those port pods out and they like the commander's parking spots behind the building. So they dropped it in my parking spot. And I was like, oh, that's fine. I'll go park wherever. And the troops put a welcome mat and a mailbox out there and a wreath on the thing. Because like pretending like I now was living there.
That's your new home. That's your new home, yeah.
So, but the best thing about when I got promoted out of there, normally you get a breakfast, like day work gives you breakfast to send you off if they like you at all. Otherwise, it's very unceremonious. But Midnights said, hey, the Midnight supervisor came to me and she's like, hey, Mids wants to send you off. And they said that they've seen you more than they've ever seen anybody that was a commander here. And I love that because I was a midnight cop and I was a midnight supervisor. And I was like, man, I would be so honored. So they did steaks and stuff in the parking lot at like 10 o'clock at night. And that was like my going away from Mason. It was great. But that was a good gig. And then I had put in for a Chiefs role and ultimately passed it up because Joe Hill was leaving and texted me. He was like, hey, I don't want to confuse you, but hey, just do the math on being a 25-year major deputy chief versus a captain, a 20-year captain. And the math was like really different. So I stayed and made major. It was a patrol bureau major first. That job was brutal. I got John Piper's job and it was just endless admin. And I mean, that is what it is when you're go to headquarters, but it was just endless admin. And like I could never get out of the building. Like it was just IA cases and approving bizarre purchases and what have you. I had such visions of like, oh, this is going to be awesome. I have the whole southeast end of the county, but I was trapped in meetings all the time. So that was fine. But anyway, one day in passing, the assistant chief who I work for was like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're thinking about consolidating our cyber and forensic assets. We want to build a whole new bureau dedicated to that. And I said, well, who are you giving that job to? And she said, oh, we'll probably volunteer somebody into that role. And I was like, I'll take that job. And she was like, really? I said, yeah, but background in forensics. I worked cases for better part almost 9 years. I said I ran investigations for 5. I like that work. And I have technical aptitude. I'm like, I would definitely do that. So because I had studied like obviously like I studied forensics, I did capstone in biometrics, studied management information systems. So I was like, yeah, I've always kind of liked that. I'm like, I'll build that. So I got over there and it's like everything else. There's no playbook, there's no budget, there's no personnel, but like started to figure out like what to consolidate and ended up putting like CSI under me, crime scene, hack investigations, like things like electronic surveillance that we rebranded. What we would call Navaris, which is our biometrics, inherited face rec, had automated fingerprints, and then digital forensics. And it was just a great group of people, really good work. They were going to move me at one point. I didn't put in for promotion and put in to go anywhere. And I was like, hey, just leave me here. Like I want to build something. I want to leave some stuff behind. And then I kept getting pinged for like I oversaw our body worn camera procurement and implementation. And then the troops actually came to me and said like, hey, we were trying to get a drone program going and they wouldn't let us, blah, blah, blah. The county doesn't like it. And I was getting ready to go to the FBI National Academy. And I was like, hey, get with me when I get back. I still own body worn cameras. I'm going to be gone for about 10 weeks. I'm like, but it sounds like a good idea. There's me last day. Ended up getting involved in drones and obviously learned a ton there and good.
Yeah, so Christian, as you walk through your assignment and all the technologies that you're responsible for, when we pivot after your career and kind of get into those things, like let's break those up. Like let's dig into drones and UAVs. Let's body worn facial rec, LPR and AI. So for sure. So like, don't go too deep on the tech while you're still walking through your career is what I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah. So, we'll cover some of that afterward, but I ended up, 2020 rolls around. I was eligible to go in January of 20. And then COVID hit. And in the beginning, it was kind of like a weird, like, where's this going? And like, what does this all mean? And I'm convinced all my people had it in February because like I remember at one point I had like 21 people out sick. And I was like, it was a problem. We were like shuffling the deck with people covering on call. It was just like weird thing like in the beginning of 20. Like I really gave it no thought because the pandemic hadn't really hit yet. And even in late February, I was in Vancouver speaking at Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. So I come back, we did a press conference in March, like a lot of things were normal, and it was like for like everybody, like just the whole world shut down. And in the beginning, like I was just still going to work and was like, all right, like all of a sudden it was kind of, I don't want to say it was nice, but candidly, I was getting a lot done. Like all the meetings fell off my calendar.
And no traffic.
Focused on the core mission. Oh, that was the other thing. Like living in Northern Virginia before the hot lanes were done, I remember driving to work and being like, "Is this really how long it would take me to get to work?" It took me.
Yeah.
It took me every single morning. It took me 60 to 80 minutes to get to work.
Yeah.
And like when during COVID, it was taking like 18 minutes. I'm not exaggerating. It was like a 20-minute ride, but every day it took me an hour, hour and 15, hour and 20 to get to work. Now there's hot lanes. It would take less time, but
that's hilarious.
Yeah, it was like a complete grind. But anyway, and then, like I think how the summer went for everybody, and the agency was in a weird place internally, externally. We had a lot going on. And we can talk about this in a little. I was getting beat up for like certain programs I ran, like Face Rec and things like that. I was in the Washington Post, ended up in a lot of other publications. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But like I think like some of that was wearing on me, and very thankfully, like the phone was ringing. But I had always told people like, nah, I'm not looking to go anywhere. Like I'm happy. I'm doing my thing. Like I'm going to stay for a couple more years. And I think toward the end of 20, there was a week in November that was just like a rough week, and I didn't want to make an impulsive decision, but I think more than anything, I was just tired. And looking back, like if I could have taken like a month off, I'd probably still be on the job. I can't. And like I was wore out, and there was a lot of uncertainty, right? Like Northern Virginia had changed a lot politically in what felt like a very short time, even though looking back, it probably wasn't, but it was very different. The chief announced his retirement. So there was this window of time where I got like some of the, got the calls, got the lunches. And I was just thinking like they won't go with an internal. They won't go with, I didn't think they'd go with an internal. And I didn't think I had a shot. I also thought there was a lot of things that needed to happen that would be hard for an internal to do. So I had a friendly relationship with Ben Bodden from Brooks Bodden Moore. Nothing more than that. Like they're a little firm. I didn't like think they even had jobs open, but mentioned to Ben that, I was kind of looking and what I was looking for. And he said, "Hey, would you consider having a conversation with us?" So I ended up meeting Ron Brooks and Chris Moore. And they were like, "Hey, we'd like to have you come work with us." And it was like a really interesting opportunity to go work Gov Affairs, to go get into the consulting space. And I ended up saying like, "Yeah, I'll do that." So basically to round up my time, I made January 6th my last day on paper, so I could cash out my leave. And it was also my day to hire. So I wanted a perfectly rounded up date. And January 6th ended up being January 6th. So my last actual day working was around the 18th or 19th of December. And mind you, it's like the height of COVID, right? So like not, I don't say this with any ego, but like I had a ton of friends. Like I remember thinking like, oh, I'm gonna have a pretty big retirement party, right? Like I'm in an empty building, like not like exaggerating. Like there might have been like a half a dozen people in this massive building. So I'm leaving on my last day, and I'm leaving like my car key with like a Post-it note, like Christian Quinn's car parked in, like there's no one to give my stuff back to. The range already had my firearm, so I was getting that. I turned in my CAD, my laptop, like there's nobody to give anything to. The only place there was anybody working was at the radio shop. Those guys were there. So I give them my portable. The guy at the radio shop went to the academy. If there was a guy in IT, but he didn't take the laptop, he's like, "Hey, you're going to give it to the chief secretary." I'm like, "I have no idea when I'm going to see her." So I sent a bunch of emails. I had a tote, and I had like all my stuff in boxes. And I walked down, and obviously I had a county car pretty much my whole career, because I was a detective and then a commander. And my family came and picked me up in front of the building. I carried the tote out, threw it in, took all my stuff off the walls. And it was like so weird. It was like, well, and then I remember I went back upstairs, because like I worked on the top floor in headquarters, and snaked my way to the chief secretary's office, used my master key to open her door and my proxy cards, and left all that stuff there, and then walked out. And I remember the thought of like, did I forget anything? Because every door I went through there was no way to get back through.
Get back.
Like I was like, oh, once I get on this elevator, there's no way for me to, and then get off of it on the first floor. There's no way for me to get back in the building. So I walked out the door, and like the door closed behind me, and it was like this very weird, like, man, I've been here my whole adult life, and it's just done, and that's that. And so ultimately, like, you know, like I think like a year later, we did something at a brewery, and there was still a lot of people came, and it was actually great because it was like no speeches, no plaques, no nothing. It was just like a ton of people that were nice enough to come out and kind of see me off, even like 10, 11 months later. But I went to BBM, and
yeah, so let's hold on real quick. Let's bring up a couple pictures before we did that one already. So yeah, so because as we're wrapping up your career, this looks a little early, but take us back and then
that's Doug Scott, the first chief that I worked for. That is on graduation day, me getting my patrol badge coming out of the academy.
Okay, gotcha. And then we saw that one, and then you did some other stuff after the job, outside of the job, not after, but necessarily.
That's Mike and Josh. Mike's with Sandy Spring, and Josh is on the job in Minnesota.
Okay, yeah. I think that's all we got. Let me see what else we got. Yeah, and then we transitioned to your consulting. But I want everyone to realize that Christian brought up Ben Bowden and Ron Brooks and Chris Moore. So Ben Bowden, great lobbyist consultant with the BBM team. But what you should know is Chris Moore is the retired chief of the San Jose Police Department, and Ron Brooks is just a giant in law enforcement. And Ron Brooks will be a future guest on the 10-4 Tavern. He ran the NCRIC, which is the Northern California Regional Intelligence Center, and a former chief of the California DOJ. And he is the guy, if you've ever heard me say, police work is the most fun you could ever have with your clothes on, that's where I learned it from, Ron Brooks. So he'll be a future guest for sure. And then just really a great team. So why don't you walk us through, Christian, as you were segueing out of the retirement, these unfortunate circumstances due to COVID with no walkouts and unceremoniously dropping keys and a laptop with a Post-it note, and then walking through doors that you could probably never go back through. How you've really carved out a really nice niche for yourself moving forward.
I'll tell you one last thing about that. Was the other weird thing that was hard was January 6th happens, right? And everything's going on. And I've been gone for like neighborhood of 2 weeks. Like I left right before Christmas, turned in all my uniforms. Like I was gone. Like I didn't have access anymore, but I had digital access. So January 6th is going on, and I log in remotely, and I'm still an employee. So I can see all the sit reps. I can see everything going on. And it was such a strange day to lose access at like close of business, because I had so many, like obviously Fairfax County responded to that. I knew a ton of people at US Capitol that I was worried about physically for their safety, and also like professionally for their reputations and their agency and stuff. It was just a very odd day to separate from the profession and to suddenly be like I don't want to say a regular person, but that is exactly how it feels. It's like you've been you've been the police your whole life, and then all of a sudden you're like, I can't see anything. I can't do anything other than watch the news. It was just a really stark way to have that end. And I think I was really fortunate to go to BBM because, as you mentioned, like Chris and Ron were former police leaders. So it was like, and Ben, having not been a cop, is like the biggest advocate and a champion for police issues, law enforcement technology. So I went to a community of people that we still serve the mission. And that was really, really important and really good. It was odd because we were like, it was COVID, right? Like vaccines, and nothing had happened yet. Nothing had thawed yet. Like it was kind of like this weird, like, hey, we're all still on Zoom. So I struggled for a while because, like, as a cop, I was still getting up every day, still putting on a uniform, still going to my office. And all of a sudden I'm like stuck in my house. And I was like, oh my goodness, man, I don't know. This is probably a mistake, but everything was fine. Like I found my way, and I truly could not say enough good things about the people at BBM. But I had this kind of itch where I wanted to do more in the way of pure tech consulting, and kind of build an ecosystem of clients around different things like digital evidence and different tools, and wanted to get involved in like shorter term projects and also like do some training and speaking and things like that. And when you're at a firm, like it doesn't, you've got to kind of balance things and you've got to do what's best for the firm. So when I went to them and said, hey, I like they were really good to me. They promoted me. They had given me opportunities. And I said, hey, it's not an expression of dissatisfaction. I'd like to take a shot at doing my own thing. And they couldn't have been kinder about it. Like Ron, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying it. He's like, hey, like they didn't give me a single piece of paper. They didn't saddle me with NDAs. Ron was like, hey, just don't take off our plate. And I was like, I would never do that. And to this day, like I just saw everybody last week at IACP. I still have a personal and professional relationship with that firm. So super, super fortunate to have crossed paths with all of them. And they were infinitely kind and let me go out on my own and do my own thing. And very thankfully, like you kind of don't know what's going to happen like when you do that, right? Because I went to a number of people, and I'll give props to like Greg McCurdy, who didn't know me from anywhere. The former number 2 at Las Vegas, got his own consulting business. He spent like 60 to 90 minutes on the phone with me, talking to me about like, hey, here's how you think of this. Here's how you think of this. Huge help. Tom, you remember I reached out to you, like, hey, I'm going to do this. Joe Cortez's former NYPD inspector, real-time crime center guy. He's got a good thing going. Like just pinged a lot of people that were kind enough to like share some insights with me. I'm like, all right. And I wanted to do it. So it was kind of one of those like, all right, what I don't know, I'll figure out. And I did. Like, I know the first year I probably made a million mistakes. I was working too hard. I was like on too many airplanes. I wasn't charging enough. And I started figuring some stuff out and getting more strategic. And then also like you start to get known. And I'm like so grateful because like now it's like, I hate to say like a turn away business, but I do because I just, people always say like, oh, why don't you hire people? And it's like, well, that comes with a different level of responsibility. Like I have contractors who work for me and they're not counting on me to pay their mortgage or to like buy groceries. Like they get work when they get work. And I think that's a very different level of responsibility to other people. Like when you take on like W2 employees. So, but yeah, off and running. And I think
so let's get into that. Yeah, so let's get into that. I think, again, I'm going to repeat myself again. Drones as a first responder and UAVs, body-worn cameras, you did a big program there, facial rec, LPR, and AI. I mean, I think for our audience, and just to check in, we're at 265 live listeners, watchers right now. It's been a steady climb up. We've had no drops, so that's good. Appreciate that, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and listening to Christian Quinn's story. We're going to pivot. I think this is going to be really important because most of our previous episodes have been mostly on the career and some good stories around good capers. And again, I'm going to repeat, every single person has said, we're on episode 18 with Christian today, that the first 17, and after hearing Christian's story, I think it stays true that 18, everyone here has been real players, no posers, nobody coming on here telling a one-trick pony story, people who really dedicated themselves to doing the work and digging in. So with that, I think your transition to this tech side is really important because the people that we've had have been great, but I don't think they have this really vision of what's happening forward. They're probably dabbling in it. They're listening, they're learning, they're wishing they had it when they were on the job, right? But you're like dug into this and you're helping agencies and legislation dictate the policy and how we move forward. And it's a wild place. And you wrote to me in an email some really interesting comments that I had been, me even being in the space that didn't even see. So if you want, let's go through tech, spend a little time on each tech, and then if they overload. But before we do that, Pete, any comments on the tech, what your thoughts and feelings are about where we're going? Because it is a wild ride right now.
My comments on tech, Tommy, are you kidding me? To me, tech is when you took the ball out of the IBM Selectric typewriter and you put the script ball in because you wanted to No, look, it's interesting. And, look, the other thing that I think is important is there's a lot of people in our profession who they get scared at the end of their career. They don't know what to do. I used to tell people all the time, are you kidding me? If you could do this job, you could do almost anything. You talk people into selling themselves into prison for the rest of their life. Don't sell yourself short. So to hear from someone who had a successful transition, I think is empowering to our listeners who might be looking to make that move, because there's life after the job, number one. But, what we don't realize is, one thing you brought up, Christian, I think is really important for people to know. I got tossed into some assignments that I didn't necessarily want, kind of voluntold, like training, for example. I wasn't an academic by any stretch, but going into those lanes, you learn things that you would not learn if you stayed in your comfort zone. So, the fact that you embrace so many opportunities to go outside your comfort zone, I think helped prepare you for your life after the job. But just
absolutely
lessons learned, I think, are really important. So I'm looking forward to our listeners hearing from you about what you did after the job. But thinking back to what you said earlier about those times where you were asked to do things and you said, "Hey, I'll do it," and great opportunities to learn and get paid to learn because you're doing it while you're on the job.
Yep. No, and I think like on the consulting side, that's like a big part of what you do is you just come in and solve problems or come in and offer a different perspective. And I do absolutely agree that doing a lot of those like atypical assignments that were a bit of a burden at the time helped me drastically to get here. The other thing I wholly admit to people, right? Like I hear from like young people on like LinkedIn and places all the time. They like want advice. I'm like, I'm probably not the best person to give you advice. Like I did so many things that were like just disjointed and not the plan. Like policing was 1,000,000% the right thing for me. No one ever steered me to that. Like if some professor doesn't say like, hey, they have summer cops on the Cape, I never even get a taste. I never even think like that might be something I do. If I don't randomly cross paths with the guy in my program, I don't end up working at Fairfax County. And Fairfax, I'm so grateful I went there because now that I work with a lot of agencies, like you come to appreciate like Fairfax had the perfect blend of like, we were big enough to be big and have a lot of resources, but we were small enough to be nimble and do things. We had enough pockets of crime to do real police work, but we were affluent enough to be well resourced. Like and I tell guys and girls all the time, I'm like, we were so spoiled, like so spoiled to have so many resources and so many, and even being in the national capital region, right? Like you get to go to so much training that other people would kill to get to go to like one time. And just so many opportunities come your way if you're kind of open to going on. But anyway,
no, so let's do it, man. Let's dive into some tech, man.
So one thing I will say about tech, and this is not like a humble brag or anything. I genuinely think this. Like I hate being called like a tech guru or what have you, because I genuinely believe this. Like I'll say this. Like I studied some in college, I like in grad school, and then even after I was out, I finished MIT's program this year in machine learning and artificial intelligence. Like that was a lift, but I'm glad I did it. I did almost other than one class, did all of them on campus in Boston, which was hard because obviously I live in DC, live in Northern Virginia. I'm really glad that I did it, but even at that, and having run all these different programs and built programs from the ground up, I still question whether I'm like the best person to talk about this stuff. And I mean that because it's like there's so much to know and things are moving so fast right now, which sounds cliche, but I definitely think in the age of AI, like things are just changing. Even if they're not truly changing, there's a perception that they are, which means they are. And there's just a lot to know about right now. I wholly admit, like I hate these like self-styled AI whisperers because I'm like, what does that exactly mean? And
that's me, by the way. When you wrote that in the email, I'm like, that's me because I'm all self-taught, and I had to reflect on that comment, and I've shared with Pete. So I wouldn't call myself a self-styled AI whisperer. I'm just embracing it and tackling it to make it work for me to get my work done.
My concern is like people in the past 2 years that have like risen up and been like, yeah, I'm an expert in AI. I'm like, well, what leads you to believe that? That's kind of like you haven't taken math since high school. Like there's a whole bunch to this behind just the outputs. There's like, there's some deep machine learning and some lessons there. But anyway, but no, I'm happy to share what I've come to know, and I wholly admit, like, kind of like being over cyber, like kind of right place, right time, twice in a row, where all of a sudden all this stuff is exploding, and I'm like, man, I was like just right here at the intersection of this, and it's certainly keeping me busy.
All right, so Christian, then would it be fair to say, if you don't want to call yourself an expert, let's just say, and I know the industry, so you're qualified to have a conversation with Pete and I in the 10-4 Tavern today and help
without a doubt,
and help us, and then our audience who are listening will just be enlightened a little bit more than they were 2 hours ago.
Like I said, Chris, for a guy like me, the IBM Selectric typewriter with the changeable ball was high tech. So anything that you can tell me today is going to be a learning experience, I can assure you.
So, but I think it's all really important.
We can get to this later, but I teach a 2-day class in AI, and I love when people come in and they got like 25 years on the job and they're nervous and they're like, man, I've never even seen Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever. Like, I love on the second day when they like come away and they've like learned a bunch of stuff. Like, that is one of the most satisfying things about like giving people training this. But anyway, let's do it.
So go ahead, man. You got it. We got, it's 8:30. We usually go for 2 hours, 10 minutes, 2:15. So we got another half an hour. Let's dig in. Like, tell us what the big concerns are in these spaces that we talked about. Like body warns, we said no. The law enforcement community said no. Now they got it. Then the community all of a sudden didn't like it because it was using it as evidence. And then where are we now with storage and transcriptions? Like, there's a lot there. Facial rec is wild. I mean, just take us through it, because there's some wild conversations in all of these.
Yeah, so we'll start with the two that you just mentioned. So I did our body worn camera program. It was funny because like implementing them, we did a pilot, right? We did a 6-month pilot, and the pilot ends and we're going to collect the cameras. I cannot even tell you how many people emailed me. So we only did half of 3 of our districts. How many people emailed me or like, hey, can we keep these? Because what they saw was it was doing them a lot of favors. Like,
yes.
And the other thing too is we get these complaints, right? And you think like, well, there's like 2 sides to each story, and there might be some credence to this. And like, I mean, you see like just crazy, like outright fabricated stories. And then some of them were like, well, could we buy our own cameras? And I was like, no, you absolutely cannot do that. And a guy came up to me at a retirement party, and he was like, hey, I have to tell you, like, we didn't want these, but we don't want to give them up. Like, and it was very interesting to see internally in only 6 months, the troops say, hey, we want to keep these. The other thing I did was, despite being, I think it was a major at the time, like the highest ranking guy over the thing, I was like, I'm going to wear one for 6 months. So the very first day driving home, I work late, and it's like, whatever, it's like 7:30 at night, and there's a little green LED light flashing. And I called the vendor. I was like, this is a complete pain in the ass. Like, how do they shut this off? Like, I got a bunch of people working midnights right now. This has got to be pissing them off. So they were like, hey, we can take care of it, blah, blah, blah. I ended up like putting a message out like that night, basically like, hey, here's how you deactivate that green light. And like, that's one of those small things like I'd have never known if I wasn't wearing it. The other funny thing about me being in uniform wearing this, because I wore a uniform every day, probably because I just didn't want to wear a shirt and tie, and it was like Garanimals to think like you get a lot of wear out of polyester, and I didn't have to pick out what I was wearing. So I wore a uniform every day, and I still like being the police and stopping cars and stuff. So I had like body worn camera footage, even at that level. But like I would walk into more people's offices and meetings, and they'd be uneasy with it. They're like, "Is that on right now? Is that on right now?" Right? It's just like a funny cultural thing that we had to get over. But anyway, like I think it did us a lot of favors. I think the age of transcription, that's like a funny conversation, because like I think the research is just coming around. I don't think I'm not going to say it's good or bad, right? Like there's a bunch of agencies who are like, oh, we're realizing all kinds of efficiencies. So here's the vulnerability I have, right? If I said to you, hey, did you just come out of that house? And you said no. And I said, are you sure? And you said, definitely not. That's one conveyance. If I said to you, did you just come out of that house? And you said, no. And I said, are you sure? Definitely not. That's two different conveyances, right? The second person, if you're a seasoned cop and you watch somebody scanning the horizon for escape routes, looking for like they're lying, right? Or at least you should reasonably suspect. On an audio transcription, both those people said, no, definitely not. And that denial is how it's recorded. And we just have to be really mindful of all the things that aren't on audio, that either aren't picked up on a mic or that are just simply nonverbals, that are intuitive conveyances of communication and information that needs to still be in a report that audio is not picking up. And I think those things are important. I think like when you discuss like somebody's threatening behavior, it's barely ever what they said. It's like took an aggressive position, had balled fists, was sweating, was like all these things that go into it. Like the audio on a camera is not picking any of that up. So again, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it has its limits. It also doesn't hear everything. It doesn't infer nuance and that kind of thing. So does it have utility? Probably. The other thing we could spend a whole bunch of time talking about this, but the other thing I think about is like, what's the goal of a police report, right? Is it to have the best literary product, or is it to preserve the best information known at the time of by the people who were there so that they can reference that in a later context, presumably court in most instances, or at least like for other administrative purposes, what have you. So I just think there's more to it. And the other thing is, if you look at like some of the research from MIT and other places on cognitive debt, where they show like, hey, if I write an essay from scratch, like, and do all my own research, like I'm going to remember the vast majority of it. I'm going to be able to have a meaningful conversation about that thing that I wrote sometime later. If I write it with the aid of a GPT, I'm going to remember more of it, but not all of it. But if I use solely an assist program, a GPT, a transcription, what have you, to write something, I almost don't remember any of it. And I think that could pose a challenge, right? Like, and it's going to take one person on the stand, on a good one, right? Because a good one doesn't go to trial for a year, where a defense attorney's like, is this a true and accurate representation? You remember? And somebody being like, I don't know, the system wrote that, right? That's going to be problematic. So while I think there's a lot of opportunities to realize efficiencies, I think there's a lot of opportunities to leverage tools like that. I just think we have to remember, like, that's all it is a tool. And ultimately, it's on people to leverage that tool for the best outcomes. So, But on the issue of face rec, I think, or you want to transition?
That's great. No, that's great. That's really good. Yeah. So let's transition. If you want to bring up face rec, I definitely want to do drones as a first responder as well. But since you brought up face rec, because I have some experience with face rec, so I'd love to hear your views on where we are now.
So what's funny is I was kind of like looked at as the guy who brought in face rec, and I didn't. Like, we had a very small pilot program that was already underway when I got there, like single terminal, couple users, and that we grew that program to a regional program, and it like National Capital Region's facial recognition identification lead system. Very unique. Virginia, Maryland, DC. Although DC didn't use it, they provided images. We did mugshots only. It sat on our Lynx architecture, so had a secure data sharing platform, and had contributors. It's like 15 million images from around the National Capital Region, maybe like only like 1.5 million people, but for our purposes, for like street crime and robberies and things like that, awesome. So really had a lot of success with it. I am like very involved in this issue now, both from a gov affairs standpoint. My company also does algorithmic assessments, have a whole methodology that we developed on that. One of the very first things I was hired to do when I went out on my own was work on face rec gov affairs issues. I am a proponent of the use of facial recognition. I am also a big proponent of having smart guardrails around it. I'm a proponent of having a good algorithm paired with a trained examiner and meaningful process things. So when you look at any of the negative outcomes in the United States, I think most of them you would look at, the vast majority, if not all, we can say that negative outcome was a result of either rotten police work or flawed processes, not
100%.
that tech.
And you know how I know that that's not only true, but I can prove it's true because there's like only like 20 of them. There's not like thousands of them.
I would admit to you, there's probably less than 10.
Right, exactly.
So, and you got to think like how many people are misidentified by eyewitnesses and things like that. And I was interviewed by the Washington Post, and I remember saying, and they actually, I give them credit because they printed it. I was like, if you take it away, is that better? Because now we're back to putting pictures up on Twitter and Facebook and having people call on the DirecTV guy that's like, I think this is the boogeyman, right? Like that's not great either. So
let me ask a question here, Christian. I want to go to Pete. Pete, before you left the NYPD, did the PIMS solution, did you ever put people in front of the digital computer for the election, or did you already transition by the time the NYPD got there? Because I'm gonna jump on Christian's point here.
We had PIMS when I was with the NYPD. It hadn't for a few years, but I'll say this too, Tommy. You know, I got 8 innocent people out of prison for murders they did not commit. Each one was an eyewitness misidentification. One of them was shady, where the witness was persuaded to pick the wrong person out. The rest were honest people who just looked at somebody and honestly thought it was the suspect. And then later on, many years later, in fact, in one case, 24 years later, new evidence surfaced, and it showed that the witness, well-intentioned witness, was wrong. So, you know, again, going to what we were saying earlier, the facial recognition technology might prevent things like that from happening.
100%. So let me tell you what my thought has always been with this, Christian, and I'm going to give it back to you because you are the right voice for this. I thought about all of this, exactly what you're saying about eyewitness testimony. And I used to put people in front of, you know, the detectives, not just me, but as I became a sergeant lieutenant, the detectives did the work and they're phenomenal. Always marveled at watching them work. But we always had a concern. You put them in front of a machine and you got these thousands of photos that you're going to scroll through. And then I always felt that I'm watching this witness and they're getting fatigued and they're tired and they've looked at thousands of people. And then they finally I go, I don't want an ID like hour 4. Like, because I think they're just trying to please because I think they're looking at the detective going, I don't want to get up here without an ID. And so that's one aspect. It's not the all aspect. And I just think that if they did not know, or if we did not get information for a 6-pack, whether sequential or an array, like I just did not like the looking at photos, thousands of photos for hours and coming back the next day and coming back the next day and looking at more. I just never liked that process. And facial rec has taken that away. And yet all of these people who say facial rec is biased, facial rec is this, it's unreliable, they have no idea how much better it is than the process from the 90s. Go.
But I think if you look at the data from like the Innocence Project, right, like 67%, it's neighborhood of 67% of the later exonerations are the result of eyewitness identifications. And then if you look at the numbers on the frequency that eyewitness identifications are actually like the causation of somebody being arrested, those numbers are really low. So this activity that accounts for very few actual arrests is like 2/3 of the time that people are exonerated. It's a result of that. So I'm not knocking a good witness. I'm just saying, like, if we're going to take anything with a grain of salt, like that's probably something we really need to be very mindful of, because, you know, like there's like the fallacy of memory and like there's a whole bunch of things there that you know, we could unpack. But I agree with you. I think using a tool of precision the right way gives you a lot of opportunities to hone in on the right subject. And I also think, you know, like if you put processes in place, I always say, like, the more extreme, when I encounter people who have like really strong views on this, the more they are one side or the other, the more it's revealed to me, like, you don't really know this issue well, because it is very nuanced, right? Are there in fact algorithms out there that have serious demographic performance issues? Yeah, there absolutely are. But like, we shouldn't be using those. But are there algorithms out there that are so statistically accurate that they've all but mitigated that, or they actually perform nearly as well, regardless of like face, skin tone? Yeah, and those are ones that, if all other things are equal and they do well in other metrics, those are ones we ought to be looking at. And the reality is, there's there's probably 24 algorithms out there that are extraordinarily accurate that we do want to leverage, but we want to pair that with trained people, smart processes, good guardrails, and just treat it as a starting point, right? Like have detectives hone in on a subject and then do what they do. Start pulling cell site location information, start pulling like records, start doing like your follow-up and work your case, but at least like, give them a starting point when they have nothing else to go on.
Well, Christian, to your point right there, you just nailed it, because in each of those cases I talked about, look, I didn't set out to free innocent people from jail. I was pursuing cases, and people would proffer it's something that they did, and we would follow up that information. But in each of those cases where someone was misidentified, when you got the actual detective's folder and you went through all the notes, not just what was in the report, but the case notes, and each and every one, the path to the correct suspect was in there. But they had an identification, and then they got tunnel vision and focused only on the person who was picked up as a witness. So you're entirely correct.
Yeah. So let me throw this out to be a little controversial on facial rec. I believe that, as what you were leading to, Christian, that it is a lead. It is not complete evidentiary towards a probable cause and make an arrest. Like you said, you got to go out and get the cell phone data. You got to go out and get other information and put the case together. Is it any less or any more significant than a anonymous call to a 911 Crime Stoppers? Hey, everybody, I'm calling you right now. I'm remaining anonymous, and I think Pete Forcelli committed this crime. You should go out and investigate that and put this case together. If you're saying I can't use facial rec at that same level of proof, then you got to dismiss all Crime Stoppers anonymous tips. It's the same exact thing, in my opinion.
Well, I think, I wouldn't say they're exactly the same thing, because I think if you have a digital image of someone and you have an algorithm and software that leads you to a subject, and you have a trained examiner who looks at the morphological comparison of the face, I would say that you're higher than in
exactly my point. Exactly my point.
I would not want that viewed as like, well, it's reasonable. Like, I wouldn't want to put a reasonable suspicion label or something like that to it. Like, I think we don't want to stake any kind of Fourth Amendment intrusion on that. However, I think it's more than a voice on the phone saying so-and-so did something, because you're starting with a digital image of somebody and you're working that up. The presumption being, one, that person was in proximity to your event and you're looking at the right subject, and two, being your processes have all played out properly and you have a lead on who that subject is. I think that is a higher threshold, but I still don't want to see it treated as reasonable suspicion.
Yeah. Right. No, agreed. And I think you got the point that I was trying to make, is like, would anyone ever say we're going to take away Crime Stoppers and anonymous tips, but they want to eliminate facial recognition? And there are moratoriums in many, many cities in this country that are not allowed to do it. So any final thoughts on facial rec, and let's roll into something else? Final thoughts?
No, we on to the next thing.
All right, yours, man. What do you like, man? What's next?
I'll say this, like, so I still consult in the drone space, but more policy and operations, and like some of the tech around it. And actually I'm running a working group in the National Capital Region on drones tomorrow. So I'm still in the game on that, but I don't consider myself to have the same expertise I did in. So one of the things I did was we stood up a program where that we said as an agency, like, hey, we'll train you and we'll pay for you to get your Part 107, but we'll pay for you to get it the first time. But if you fail the test, we're not paying it over and over again. You go back on your own dime. That's like the first hurdle you've got to clear before you can even be in our program. And there's reasons for that are just advantageous. It's like a standardized process. It's like having the 107 helps with certain things. And then we have, COAs and special government interest waivers and things like that, that we fly under. But I, as a boss, was like, oh, I should probably, if I'm going to make this decree, I should probably show that it can be done. So I went to whatever it was, our 2 or 3 day school, and then I went and took the 107 test and I passed it. Now I'm not saying I got an A+. I passed. because I don't think you can walk in off the street and take that test. Like it is a bear of like aeronaut. I mean, it's not super hard, but it's like still like it's legit. Like you've got to like study aeronautical charts and stuff. So I actually before I finished my career, I bought a UAS to just a hobbyist to fly and stuff. So I have an appreciation for the tool, but this space has grown so much in the past 5 years. I marvel at what agencies are doing now. And I'll tell you an anecdote from my time on the department. I was covering for actually there was an event that went out, not a SWAT call out, but it was like one of those open field barricades, guy in a yard with a knife, like big hunting knife, holding cops at bay, kind of a mental health thing. I don't think there was anybody else in the house, no urgency. So they're negotiating with the guy in the backyard. They're getting a temporary detention order. There's a couple SWAT guys driving home from training that stopped. And then 2 other SWAT guys come. And then 2 of my guys were out that had unmanned aerial systems. I'm like, hey, swing by there. This is super, super early in our program, like the first couple months. I'm like, swing by there, see if you can help. So they put up a large drone high in the air that's running thermal and something low that's just running like a low light camera on the backyard. So I'm home, living 1 county away. I turn on my portable radio. I bring my cat in. I got my dual screen monitors, and I'm sitting in my house and I'm watching thermal vision Overwatch. I have a good view of the suspect. I have the CAD running. I have the radio on, and I'm like seeing all this in real time. And I had this like funny moment where I realized the duty officer running the event, the cops on the front of the house, they don't know what I know. And I'm like 18 miles away or whatever it was, because this is like happening in Springfield. And I had this moment where I was like, this is how to get this to the next level. Like the people there have to know what I know and be able to see all this real-time situational awareness. And I think this is what you see agencies doing now, where the drone programs are married to their real-time crime centers. They have like mobile units that come out and they like open up the truck, and now they have like video where, you know, like they're all huddled around it. They're calling the event. They can see real time. And it's almost like this has become the norm. This is the expectation now. This isn't like a whiz bang fun tool that people aren't familiar with. Like anytime we have a planned event like Marine Corps Marathon or whatever in the DC area, not necessarily in the district because it's a little bit more challenging in that airspace. But like, you know, here in Northern Virginia, everybody's making it. I don't have dogs. That's not me.
Tommy.
I muted. Sorry.
But anyway, so, you know, I think really, and I think for agencies that have never had an aerial perspective, like we were kind of like, I got a lot of pushback, like, hey, you guys have 2 helicopters. What do you need UAS for? And I just think it's a different tool for different purposes. You know, the first time agencies have like an aerial perspective on that situational awareness, it's just, it's remarkable. And it's like, you know, I hesitate to use the term game changer, but for patrol operations, like in smaller and mid-sized agencies that have no aerial support, it's just an awesome tool. And then add to that, like the non-operational stuff, like we were doing like ortho mosaics for crime scene pictures and stuff. Like we had a kind of a crazy shootout where like it really showed the depravity of the people involved in it, because you could see like this apartment complex and this playground. We had another thing where, you know, a guy runs and he gets I can't remember if he's slain or assaulted, but anyway, like we retraced the path using the UAS, like for demonstrative purposes, crashes. You just can do a lot with them. They're a great tool, and they've come a long way. Like there's, you know, they're easier to fly with some respects. They're awesome on tactical operations. Like I remember like the SWAT commander who I was tight with, our kids played baseball together, and they were kind of like, there was a couple guys on the team that were excited about them, but everybody else kind of thought it was gimmicky nonsense. And I remember running into him when we were both retired at one of our kids' games, and I said, hey, did you guys ever adopt those? You use them? And he laughed and he was like, bro, he's like, we use them on every single op. He's like, we get there and we'll knock out a window with 40 millimeter, like a foam round, and we immediately put them in on every level, and we just start eating up ground. And he's like, we've had people hiding in corners. We've had guys hiding in closets. We've had people try to surrender to them. We have found guys holed up in like powder rooms and been able to like shrink problems and get the victims. So just like a cool tool all the way around. And like the intersection of AI, whole bunch of integrations there, a whole bunch of other things that you can do. Easier to fly, easier to like see things, object tracking, just a bunch of things like coming online that are going to be really helpful from an operational and investigative standpoint.
So that's all great, but you said there are concerns, right? So what are the pitfalls? What is to look out for?
I mean, I think like you're always going to be dealing with privacy concerns. And here's the trick, right? We took the show on the road. We did a ton of community engagement on the front end. We also adopted on our webpage, like I knew of this because like people would call and ask like, why was the helicopter flying? So our helicopter division started putting their missions online. Like you could just log in unless it was like some kind of like really, really important like OPSEC thing. Like all the helicopter missions were like posted like, why was the helicopter up? When was up? So we started doing that with the UAS program. We're like, hey, you can log in and look at like whatever we're doing, like whether it's training, whether it's a call for service, what have you. And that tends to satisfy people's curiosity. The other thing we did was we made it very clear, like, hey, what we're not doing, like, we're not interested in looking in your yard. We're not going to look in your windows. Like, we're using this to find lost people, missing kids, to find suspects, to keep people safer, to keep officers safer. And I think that's where it's at, is like really just putting it out there. Like, this is what we do with them. And it's probably equally as important to say, this is what we don't do with them. Here's the other thing about UAS from an operational standpoint. Sometimes a whole bunch of AI and flight assisted things are not the best things. Like I mentioned, like knocking out a window and putting it in. Like you almost don't want too much pilot assisted controls in there, because the thing won't go through little holes. It won't go through. You need like the right tools that like can fly in a GPS denied environment, where if you got to go into a school or a mall and you have no signal, the thing will still operate. It'll still transmit video back. But I think that there's just way more upside to UAS than downside. And I think, it does require like smart engagement with the public, with your communities, and truly like making it known, hey, here's what we're going to do and here's what we're not going to do. And that tends to offer people reassurance. And then, you'll still find people that are against it. But for the most part, I think they've come to be almost like ubiquitous. Like people expect it. And you're like putting the videos out showing like, hey, we caught these suspects. We did this with our unmanned aerial systems. Like we take that for granted, but the public likes to see that.
Yep. That's an interesting thing, Tommy, going back to this conversation here. I recently was asked to join a discussion regarding active shooters. And there's this, you might even know about this already, Christian. There's companies out there that are making basically surveillance cameras that would be used inside a space like a school or a mall, that are capable now of detaching from the ceiling and becoming drones to follow a threat through a place like a mall or a school. And some of them are even capable of deploying like OC spray or something to help try to slow down the shooter. So, I mean, this is like truly an emerging technology, even though it's out there and it's being used already. It's already being morphed into other things. So, yeah, we'll see where it goes.
You seen anything like that, Christian?
I have seen post-mounted UAS that can take off. I've not seen an indoor version. I know that there's a lot of state codes out there. This gets murky because they have restrictions on launching projectiles from the UAS and propellant and things like that. So probably more to come on that. That's probably going to be state specific. But I could see from a tech standpoint, between object tracking and autonomous flight, it's not like it's not undoable. It can be done.
Right. Ambient AI was participating in this discussion too. They had some role in it. I don't know how big the role itself was in the product, but theirs was more along the lines of detecting the firearm on the person that would lead to the drone detaching from the ceiling and following somebody. I was like, wow, okay. Yeah.
I'd want to see that in a real world environment, only because I mean, I can envision that the tech involved in that would be computer vision to spot the firearm, object tracking to stay with it, autonomous flight to follow. So, I mean, all of those things exist. I just wonder if that ensemble would function as well as it's supposed to in a real world in like low light or on a funny angle. I'd want to see that in like real world application.
Yeah, well, they're working on it, so I mean, we'll see
Yeah.
soon enough, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the convergence of all those things put together. Like you could do it.
Right. Yep. All right, let's wrap up the last tech recent story that came out was there's an integration between an LPR vendor and a doorbell vendor who are then going to allow the public to send their information to the network, trying to keep the vendors out of it, their names. But so LPR went. And I was on that journey with Brooks Bowden Moore for the better part of the 2010s. Finally got all the negative legislation suppressed, and they were all fair bills in each state. I think 1 or 2 states are still around with some restrictions on LPR for law enforcement. And then the hot list. And then there's a new emergent now because these neighborhood networks and these private HOAs buying LPR cameras and in all this network. And so where are you at? What do you think is going on with people being able to say, sure, take the footage from my doorbell that now takes a camera and takes pictures of cars and sending it? And where's this privacy? And just for everyone's knowledge, there is 9 upper court decisions that have all rendered LPR as constitutional and legal. There has been no upper court decision on the aggregate of data and the use of the data. So I'll turn over to you, Christian.
Funny timing on this. So there's a case right now in Eastern District, the Schmidt case, comes out of Norfolk, Virginia. Originated like around February or so. And basically the plaintiff's contention is that by putting up so many cameras, the city created a dragnet of surveillance. Their license plate reader cameras, public information. They use Flock, and basically their contention is you can't go anywhere without your movement being tracked. And their assertion is that you can be tracked to such detail that that data constitutes carpenter data. Now, there was a case last year, the Church case, which was a pretty bad case. Where a judge ruled, and in my opinion, this is an activist judge ruling, that LPR data was analogous to carpenter data, and the police should have got a search warrant to get it, which is for a million reasons, not a million, but like basically it's this, right? When you look at Supreme Court cases that deal with technology to track movement and location of people, you got the Jones case that dealt with GPSs, you got the Carpenter case. When you look at the Carpenter case, right, there was a persistent level of tracking there that constituted more than 100 GPS data points per day that they had that data set. On top of that, a phone is attributable usually to one human being, and it goes inside locations with you, and it's pinging the whole time generally, right? So that breadcrumb trail is considerably more robust and elaborate as to like retrace all of your movement throughout a given time period, more so than you'd be able to recall, or we'd be able to do surveillance on somebody and assemble, right? So fine, that's a search. License plate readers cannot do that. Even if we went out of our way to subvert the Fourth Amendment, you could not deploy enough license plate readers to do that, because you're getting a vehicle at a fixed moment in time, lat, longitude, timestamp, image of the outside of the vehicle, data that is non-attributable to a person. Like if you want to personalize your tag, you got to go out of your way to do that. Now, is there some tech nuance here that we probably should be cognizant of? Yeah, because we do have to ask the question, when is the license plate reader no longer just a license plate reader? Because if it'll do bumper stickers and bike racks and occupants and other, like now we're expanding beyond just a picture of a piece of metal on the outside of the car that by code you're required to have, right? Because I always tell people, like, you can own a vehicle and not put a license plate on it. You got to put a license plate on it to drive it on a state maintained road or a public roadway or whatever, county-based road. That's right. You can have a motor vehicle and not get a driver's license. You don't have to ever register it. So the reason you do all these things is because of all the other regulations that accompany owning a vehicle when you want to drive on a state maintained road, like state inspection and registration and all these other things. So as we get into this space, I am keeping an eye on the Schmidt case. I've been working on some things from a gov affairs standpoint. I like to say I'm optimistic, like that the common sense is going to prevail here, but I am a bit nervous that this case has made it this far. And that is being heard now. And that'll be a very key decision that they come out with. And there was an effort made in Illinois as well this past year, but I think that's going to resolve more favorably. So I would just say this, like there are definitely organized efforts out there, and there are just groups that do not like license plate readers. There are legislators that do not like license plate readers. So on one hand, yeah, it's the same old talking point where there are a moment in time you're required to have a plate to operate on state main towed road. The other thing we got to be mindful of is we got to be talking to these vendors, and we need to see the table as a profession to say, hey, don't necessarily do every single thing you can do because it's not helpful to us. At a certain point, the capability, it's no longer a license plate reader. It's simply a camera with computer vision, and a network of hundreds of those, we might be in a different place if it's presented that way. It may not be, there may be a vulnerability there with respect to, is that a search? So I think regardless of who owns the camera, right? Because if I have a Ring camera and I want to share that feed with the police, I could do that. If the government puts up a camera, and this is no different than like when you've got a real-time crime center and like hotels, transit systems give you that camera feed in the interest of public safety, right? But I think license plate readers in particular tend to draw people's ire. So we just have to be smart about that, and we have to have smart policy conversations on the front end, just so that everybody is speaking the same language with respect to what are these used for, what are the limitations we put on ourselves in terms of how we deploy them and how we use them.
Sure.
Tommy, you know what I say all the time is that there are certain factions of our society that will demonize anything that helps the police. Specifically, it helps the police put people in jail. ShotSpotter is a perfect example. So I mean, we just need to be able to roll with the punches and understand that. Somebody's going to complain about anything that helps the cops.
Yeah, my worry is that like I feel like in the age of like AI as a broad concept, it tends to fuel more of those apprehensive arguments. And when people don't understand a tool, they might fear it. And I worry about getting a bad ruling or getting just bad legislation in this environment, despite the fact that, it's kind of like, it's the same old tool it always has been and the same legal precedents that have always applied. And, to your point, like those rulings have always gone our way. So I'm engaged in this Schmidt case, and now there's nothing to be done other than to watch how it plays out in court. But that's obviously got some serious ramifications. If anybody were to say at that level that, LPR data constitutes Carpenter data for some reason.
Yeah. All right. So let's do this. Let's start wrapping up. We're 2 hours and 5 minutes in. AI, what is the future, Christian? Like, we all know GPT. I use 5 different platforms. I use Copilot for work inside of my work environment. Then I dabble in the other stuff. I use it for my medical. I use it for projects. I use it for recipes. We cook. I am very holistic in the expertise, almost to the point where I'm starting to lean into that as a Google search, no longer searches Bing, Google, or whatever, just all of my information. But that's for me as a human being and a person. But like, what does it mean for law enforcement? Because people should know that there are states that if you have the name AI tagged to your product that you're doing, which has probably been the same product for 15 years, but they never promoted it as AI. As soon as you say powered by AI, you might find yourself out of an opportunity to sell a technology to an agency. So what does the future look like in AI in law enforcement? What's going to happen? What are you predicting? What do you think? And what should we look out for?
So really fast, we've always had these algorithmically assisted processes, like certain aspects of facial recognition, even like some elements of like license plate readers, computer vision to search videos and parse stuff. In the age of generative AI, where this is now at the forefront of public conscious, right? The biggest thing is all of these LLMs that are now coming into the fold that are reliant upon GPT technology, general pre-trained transformers, which is what ChatGPT was, the first one to come out in 22. I used to think oh, these hallucinations are something these vendors have to work through and mitigate. And I don't think that anymore. I think the tools are doing exactly what they're meant to do. They're not truth oracles. They're not aggregating factual data. They are assembling information. And because they have the power to tokenize data, reassemble text, and present it to you in a semantically correct way so it sounds really conversant, there's a chance that it's going to assemble it in a way that's conversant but factually incorrect. So we as end users, and all those use cases that you just talked about for home use, they're low stakes. There's you get your recipe wrong, no big deal. I think on the policing side, we just have to be really savvy to the fact that all the things we talked about earlier, where people just trust a return on the face rack or whatever it is, that automation bias. We got to be really smart about that and not take outputs as fact. We have to recognize that, hey, something put this together and it didn't necessarily put it together to give us the truth. It doesn't even, that's the other thing, is we tend to give generative AI a lot of credit that it doesn't deserve. I'm not diminishing the power of these tools. I'm just saying it doesn't actually know anything. It doesn't rationalize, it doesn't retrieve information, it doesn't infer based on experience. They're powerful tools, but they're really just text assembling tools. Now, I'm really minimizing, but there's a thing called emergent abilities, and basically that's too long a conversation, too deep to tech. But basically that talks about why are these LLMs able to write code? Why are they able to do logic problems and things like that? It's a really interesting thing that they have certain capabilities that are beyond the intended design. And that's both exciting, but it can be problematic because, in policing, if you can't explain it, if it's inscrutable and you can't break down exactly how it works or how it creates the outputs, that's where those questions around fairness and equity and that kind of stuff come in. And those tend to be really complicated when you get into the weeds of how a neural network does what it does, what data was it trained on. So not to skirt the answer, just to kind of suggest a lot of moving parts there. I do think this. I think a lot of these tools are probably at the moment, they're at the peak of their capability, simply because there's only so much data in the world. There's only so much synthetic data you can create. It's debatable whether that actually has value. In terms of computational power, we're kind of where we're at the moment. So it's going to take a couple more breakthroughs before these things get stronger. What I think we're going to see are kind of bolt-on tools to make them more usable. There's a running joke, in among learned AI minds, that's something that's its entire utilization that's predicated on math, but it sucks at math. It's kind of funny. There's a lot of examples of that. And then I think, just as agencies, where is it okay to use this? And I think, algorithmically assisted processes are getting better, but anything that runs on generative, I just think, I'm not saying don't, I'm just saying be very savvy to the fact that those outputs cannot be trusted. So kind of brainstorming and things like that, but anything high stakes, I'm not a big fan of necessarily infusing those into our operations. I think other things are making traction way faster, like computer vision and stuff like that. So those are areas we're going to see real verifiable returns. But LLMs, GPTs, anything generative, I'm very I like messing with them myself, but I think there's a lot of liabilities there in terms of incorporating those into anything that's high stakes or anything that's truly a law enforcement use.
Yep. So I'm going to speak on that, whether it was LPR and verifying a plate on a read on a hot list hit, whether it was facial recognition and the processes that you were talking about earlier. I've been involved in ballistic analysis and having to shift the lead gen from the technology to a firearms tool mark examiner, right? And we might have a tool mark examiner, one of the few in the country. There's only 400 in the United States, and one of them is a extensive ballistic examiner. She might come on. We're trying to line up some dates, so that'll be really interesting on the forensics, firearm stuff. But my point is, all of these things, in my opinion, require a human in the loop. Absolutely. Verification. Never, ever, ever like take these as leads, follow the lead, check it, verify it. It's just like someone telling you a rumor in your ear. Say, oh, Pete Forcelli does this, that, and the other thing. Okay, well, is the source credible? Is the information credible? I don't know Pete to ever do that, and you are a liar, right? So I'm not going to take that information. So the detective, the investigator, the supervisor over the case always has to look, where is this information coming? Is that the only thing that we're looking at? And the human in the loop is, I don't think the human in the loop is ever going to be out of technology in my lifetime.
No, particularly for like the police mission, and almost
because it's so important.
Yeah, and I think that's really, we got to remind ourselves, like, these are just tools, and they're tools for like good people to wield to help them do their best work, not to replace the work that needs to be done.
Yep. So Marlon, Finest Unfiltered Family, he's on the show with Eric and John on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. In my opinion, propensity for big tech to be woke, the left progressive, is a problem. So I know for a fact, if I ask a political question in one of the GPT tools, that there's one, I'm not going to say which one it is, definitely has a different slant than the answers in the others that I use. I run the same prompt in 3 different AI tools, and I get 3 different answers, and one of them is weird.
So I'll venture a guess, because I don't factually know this, but I'll tell you that I would expect that from Grok, because Grok pulls in its data set, it pulls on Twitter. So right. You're like, whatever is in the Twitterverse, or X rather, it is pulling that into it. So that's going to give you different outputs. Sure. Additionally, like even some of the models as to like, when were they trained and what was the data set? You know, that's gonna influence the output. And contextual cueing, like if you, or what might be called prompt engineering, if you manufacture those parameters to give you certain outputs, you can even influence what you get back. So, yep.
So we got some real comments, real quick. Chronicles, they hallucinate for sure. I think we've all seen those. I iterate like at least on a recipe as an example, because I don't want to get too far into some more serious stuff. Like a recipe, I may iterate 3 or 4 times saying, no, I don't really like that one. No, you missed an ingredient. I tell them what I have. I play like Chopped on TV. I have these ingredients. What kind of dish can I do? And then they completely miss it and say, you didn't even consider the fact that I have jalapeno peppers. You know what I mean? So those are for sure. And then we got Chronicles of Collapse. I just had a discussion with Grok on the polymarket prediction of the Democratic primary. Hilarious, Marlon. So these guys are going into AI for their election coming up for the mayorship in New York City coming up. And then what would you say the top 3 skills for mastering AI and LLMs? We'll leave it with that last question. Best places to learn, and then we'll start wrapping up the show.
So I would say top 3 skills. One would be just basic understanding of GPTs, because that's what powers all there were LLMs before there was ChatGPT. The understanding, like just the basics of a neural network, like how they work, like just parameters, vectors, that kind of thing. Sounds like complicated if you've never heard the terms, but you can find something on like Coursera, YouTube, what have you. The basics of how does it work. Contextual prompting is probably key in terms of like how to get the outputs. And there's like these different like acronyms for like, you know, like I like the ones that are like the role, output, parameters, where you dedicate like what you want, tone, that kind of thing, because that's going to get you more out of it. And then probably simplicity in terms of like knowing how to like iterate on those outputs, knowing how to take what it gives you. Because if you mess with like the $20 a month OpenAI version, ChatGPT, and you use like deep research or you use agents and stuff like that, you'll find you get like a ton of stuff back, but you still have to do stuff with it. You still got to work that into like some kind of like format that you can actually make use of it. So just knowing how to iterate on it. So, I mean, like maybe not the best answer, but basic foundational stuff, contextual prompting, and then iterating on outputs. And that's probably going to get you to where you want to be with respect to like just making use of the tool the best way that you can.
Yep.
Nice.
All right. Well, with that, Christian, great conversation, really solid career, really good police work, and then segueing into a fascinating conversation where you've taken up your second career to dive deep into the technology and help guide the cops and the public safety folks that we love, and ultimately protecting and advocating for the communities that we all serve. So, Pete, I'll let you have final thoughts, and then we'll start doing my wrapped up, the production stuff that I do.
Yeah. Well, first off, as a 3-time resident of Fairfax County, Christian, I was here in 2012 to 14, and then went to Miami, and came back. And anyway, thanks for your service to this county. It's a great place to live. Good cops. That's number one. Number two, we've had a lot of great guests on the show. I've enjoyed each and every one of them, but I don't know that I've left a show before this as enlightened as I am today, because I'm not the most technologically savvy guy. So thanks for your time, and it's been a great episode. And look, I live in Fairfax. I know you don't live too far away. If you ever want to grab a beer, reach out.
I'd love to.
I like to drink in real taverns too, not just the ones on the World Wide Web. It'd be great.
No, it sounds good. Thank you, guys. I'm super grateful for where I've gotten to, and grateful to keep giving back to the mission. So always like talking about it too, like talking tech and hanging with my own. So
all right, Chronicles of Collapse. All you guys are fascinating. Congratulations on episode 18. Thank you very much. We really appreciate that. We really do want to bring really good people, positive comments, positive stories, positive careers, enlighten them and see where they're at. Next week we have a great it's going to be a really good show. It's a great show, but it's a retired sergeant from Coral Gables, Florida, who is a child of a police officer who was killed in the line of duty in North Miami when she was just 5 weeks old. And she became a public servant. She became a police officer. Her sister is a firefighter, and her other sister was a police dispatcher. So all of these kids were left without a father. He's a hero, Carl Mertez. So we'll talk to Carla Miller next week. But in the meantime, you'll see all the promos and all social media around that. But with that, I am going to do my wrap-ups. Any final thoughts before I get into the outros? And Christian, stay on for a little wrap-up with Pete and I afterwards, all right? Any thoughts? Anything? Good? We're good? All right. All right. So tomorrow at 8:05, New York City Councilman Robert Holden, Democrat, for Curtis Sliwa, tomorrow with the finest Unfiltered, John, Eric, and Marlon. Then at 5:05 p.m., the Executive Perspective, Ron and Rob, will be bringing on Curtis Sliwa, the Republican candidate for mayor. As we talked at the beginning of the show, it is unbelievable that people are endorsing Andrew Cuomo, even though he already lost in a primary and he is an independent. And I don't understand how anyone is asking the independent ticket to withdraw and the Republican ticket staying in. It doesn't make sense, but you'll hear the really solid breakdowns from both John and Eric and Marlon on the finest Unfiltered at 8:05, and then the Executive Perspective will break this down and talk to Curtis Sliwa at 5:05 tomorrow as well. From there, we go into the Sal Greco show Thursday at 1:05 p.m. I'm not sure of who the new guest is, the upcoming guest on Thursday next week, but don't miss that. And then Pete, we always promote Pete's book, The Deadly Path. He's done a couple of podcasts. So look for Pete on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. He continues to speak on the Fast and Furious. But Pete, you want to plug your book?
Yeah, no, hey, it's for sale on Amazon. You can get it at certain bookstores as well. I'll be speaking about this at the National Homicide Investigators Association conference in Orlando in November. And then Penn Lake asked me to come and speak at their huge training seminar that they're doing in March. So, hey, man, Brian Terry, the Border Patrol agent who was killed as a result of those guns being smuggled, case was overturned against the killers. They're going to go back on trial. And all I care about is that family, good Americans, good people, that they get justice, and that Brian Terry rests in peace. He's a hero. God bless him.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, 92 Charlie, just calling you out real quick because great show. Fairfax County is a great place. Thanks, Christian. My mouse is acting up, so I'm not going to pull it up on the screen. And you also indicated earlier in the show that you were down in Charlottesville, my hometown, and the Whiskey Jar. I can say that I've indulged in a few cocktails there as well. So if you're ever in Charlottesville, look me up. You can find us at YouTube at The Finest Unfiltered, X at 10-4 Tavern. Pete and I, most prominent on LinkedIn. Christian as well is very, very prominent on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at the 10-4 Tavern. With that, everybody, I'm going to hit the outro. Have a great night. Please be safe. Please take care of yourselves. Pete, you know what to say to everybody, and I'll let you go.
It's okay to not be okay. It's not okay not to do something about it. If you've seen something bad in your career, which we all have, and you're in a dark place, get some help, man. Talk to clergy, talk to a friend, talk to counselors, but don't sit in the darkness, man. Find a light.
Amen. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great night. See you next week.